The story begins in a very hostile environment inside a spaceship where desperate screams echoed, saying that everyone was going to die. There were bloodstains everywhere as people begged for help. The inside of the ship was filled with strange objects. Scattered on the floor and walls, in the midst of that chaos, some soldiers arrived. They ordered everyone to gather in the captain's room immediately. However, the captain wasn't responding. This caused one of the soldiers to get angry. He wanted to abandon his superior. Yet soldier number 1 insisted they should save as many people as they could. As they moved through the destroyed hallways, the soldiers called out to the survivors. However, when approaching certain areas, they found numerous bodies scattered on the floor, all dead. The scene left the group in shock. But the leader asked them to get a grip and ordered them to find any survivors as soon as possible. During the search among a pile of corpses, a hand emerged, pleading for help. One of the soldiers approached and tried to calm the person, telling them to hang on a bit longer, but suddenly, a horrible creature appeared, holding that hand. It was the one mimicking the human voice to lure victims. The soldier tried to warn his teammates about the monster, but it was already too late. The creature moved with incredible speed, dodging all the soldiers' shots. Then it released a spray of acid that hit some of their faces, melting them away. One of the soldiers watched in panic as the monster devoured the body of one of his friends. Trying to react, he reached for a bomb to sacrifice himself and kill the monster with him. However, the creature gripped his hand tightly. On that monster's shoulder was a pink slime that absorbed the bomb and made it explode inside itself, killing the soldier too. The alien, coldly, walked over to a security door and used the hand of one of the dead soldiers to try to unlock it. But the system denied access for not recognizing the user. In response, the pink slime handed another bomb to the alien, who used the explosion to smash the door. Inside that room, there were 2 people hiding, trying to survive. The alien, now clearly identified as a hostile alien life form, moved to devour everything in its path, growing bigger and bigger. The scene then shifts to another point in the universe. In a cold metal cargo compartment, someone reflects on their own situation, admitting they had no choice but to transform into a form of alien life in a survival game. In that game, it was necessary to choose between various space races to evolve. It was a survival RPG where different species could be developed with varied strategies. They remember that in other games, they had already been a metallic gremlin, a monster, a mutant that tore apart enemies in one-on-one fights, and even a mental leader of a hive that conquered planets despite having tested many creatures. Terrifying cosmic beings confessed that he had only truly grown fond of one specific race. It was an unidentified special aggressive shapeshifter, a creature inspired by horror movies like Alien. That race had a unique ability to grow infinitely by absorbing genetic information from its victims. Even though it seemed extremely powerful, its initial difficulty was brutal because surviving at first was almost impossible. Plus, it had no resources to cooperate or communicate with other races, making it one of the worst options in the game. Yet that race became his favorite. He liked the freedom to evolve however he wanted and the absurd strength that depended only on the player's choices and desires. Thus began the game as that initial metamorphosis. The system displayed his status as a larva and defined the main objective: survive. His only ability was hypersense. Realizing this, he regretted a bit choosing that creature. He admitted it was his fault for being such a fan of Alien, but he knew he couldn't worry about that now. He started to feel intense itching as he shed his skin. Something he hadn't imagined would be so uncomfortable. He knew he needed to feed quickly since the hunger was unbearable and left him vulnerable. Looking around, he concluded that he was on a ship from a megacorporation or maybe a stellar union. He was sure that if they captured him at that moment, they would kill him without hesitation. So he activated his hypersense. Examining the whole ship to try to find food, he stupidly managed to detect the place where food was stored. When he got there, he found a lock with a password. Using his hypersense again, he discovered that the combination was simply 1, 2, 3, 4. Upon unlocking the compartment, he found several protein bars and started devouring them, even though they tasted like rubber. Despite the horrible taste, at least he got some essential nutrients to stay alive. While he was feeding, a cockroach ran by him without noticing. He swiped his tail and killed the insect, and instinctively devoured the cockroach, and immediately received a notification saying that the house effect had activated. He had obtained the genetic fragment of the cockroach, which granted him wings. He felt lucky to get that fragment so early since that core genetic would allow him to operate like an amorphous being. He knew that the more genetic data he collected, the more he could evolve his organism. Upon accepting the new ability, he felt the wings emerge from his back. At first, he had difficulty moving them, but soon realized he only needed to activate the trapezius muscles. With that, he managed to flap his wings and fly. However, he soon felt intense hunger. The energy consumption for flying was much greater than he expected. He realized that to use the wings effectively, he would need a special trait that reduced energy expenditure. He then decided that his first goal would be to gather a set of traits that would give him an advantage, so he set out to hunt cockroaches around the ship. One by one, he devoured them, counting until he reached the 21st. After eating so many, they started to taste like burnt pancakes. The system notified him that he had acquired the chitinous exoskeleton trait, which increased his defense accordingly. He leveled up, but while it was a good skill, it wasn't useful at that moment. What he really needed was the robust vitality that reduced energy consumption and slowed down aging. He knew that many insects and plants had that trait and that it would be essential to control his constant hunger. He concluded that he would need to eat a huge amount of cockroaches to get what he wanted. He changed locations in the ship to find more prey. When a cockroach tried to escape, he quickly caught it with his tail and devoured it. He finally obtained the much-desired robust vitality. His body underwent a slight transformation that made him better prepared to survive. At that moment, he reflected that the crew of the ship and humanity itself were his enemies. From the footsteps he heard in the hallways, he realized he didn't have much time before being discovered. He needed to evolve as quickly as possible to avoid a grim future. He decided it was time to leave that cargo compartment and take his first step toward expansion. He thought about where he could go and concluded that the destination was already decided. He chose to head to the cooling room, which was near the reactors. It was an important area, but with little movement of people. If he couldn't establish himself there, he might even damage the reactor to get rid of the humans, so he entered the pipe to reach his destination. But he was quickly pushed back by the force of the internal wind. He felt fear as he knew he could die. Crushed or cut by the fan blades, he carefully assessed the situation and knew that if he damaged the fan, the humans would discover him, so he needed to fly through it. He used his shape-shifting abilities to focus as much as possible. After analyzing the airflow and the movement of the blades, his brain indicated the exact moment to act. Without hesitation, he jumped strongly and barely made it through, almost losing his tail in the process. Relieved, he continued on his way. As he moved through the ducts, he found a spider and immediately devoured it, adding more genetic data to his repertoire. Then he heard human voices chatting in a lab. One was asking about the results of guinea pig 26. Another responded that it had been a failure. A man commented that the leader would get angry, but another recalled that the captain was from Earth and was tied up. They finished their shift for the day, leaving the place in silence. He reflected that this ship was not just a common transport, but a research facility run by a megacorporation. Knew that megacorporations were powerful factions in the solar system made up of Earth humans who dominated entire nations and replaced traditional governments. Usually with materialistic values, the Megacorp in particular was notorious for its cruel practices, like turning healthy people into slaves. Thought that if those corporations did that in the game, they'd probably be even worse in real life. For the moment, decided to just explore the environment, aware that what he found could change his destiny. If the facility was aimed at creating mutant super soldiers, he could acquire a more resilient body and combat skills. If they researched psychic powers of a Carius skill, special elven race, he could gain mental abilities, something he had always dreamed of having. As he moved forward, he heard a weak voice asking for help. While investigating, he found a slime being tortured. Clearly suffering, used his hypersense to analyze the situation and discovered that the slime was being electrocuted, defenseless, and at the mercy of humans. Then he used his hypersense to analyze the place and noticed that by pressing a specific button, he would end the experiment without hesitation. He activated the command, ending the suffering of the slime, which silently thanked him for being saved. Shortly after, he heard footsteps approaching and quickly hid in the shadows. At that moment, a woman appeared with her cat, questioning the researcher about when test subject 26 would yield results. The man, visibly nervous, asked for more time, but she reminded him that time meant credit, and that they needed results to present to the company before reaching their destination. Warned him that without progress, the company might reconsider his position. The pressure left the man desperate, begging for any solution to not lose his job. She called him researcher goodbye, and explained that she didn't want them to reach that point, but that she was counting on him. Said that if he achieved results, he would be guaranteed a promotion as research leader or at least a stable position. Additionally, mentioned that if the plan went as expected, they could gain business connections with Mars, which showed great interest in the project. The man asked if they could administer the Solonium, a drug developed by the Stellar Union to awaken test subjects. Explained that the drug had not been fully tested yet. Still, she ordered to use the drug immediately. The researcher hesitated, saying that without the proper neutralizer, it could be dangerous. But after discussing it, he decided to start the application with just 0.1 milligrams, began to slowly increase the dose, moving to 3, then 5, and up to 7 milligrams. When he reached that amount, the slime finally reacted, excited with the response. The woman said they could now increase the dose further. Despite the researcher's reluctance, she pressed the button herself to apply more medication. The slime screamed in pain, begging for help as it suffered shocks and mutations under the cold gaze of the woman watching, all without showing emotion. After the experiment, the slime's appearance had completely changed. She found the results interesting and ordered more tests, demanding detailed reports on all reactions. At that moment, she felt something watching her. She looked around but saw no one. The amorphous creature hidden had observed everything and considered that action unforgivable, swearing that woman would die soon for her cruelty. The scene shifted to the amorphous creature building its nest, using its hypersense to map the entire environment, feeling that now the ship was a part of itself. It understood that information was essential to win any war. With it, it could track every movement of the enemies on its fourth day as an amorph. Finally, it completed the nest, positioning itself between the nest and the cargo hold, devouring as many cockroaches and spiders as possible to strengthen itself while gathering all the information it needed about the ship and its occupants. It noticed the woman always followed the same routine. Her name was Kisaragi. Yuyin, the leader of the research team at that place, despite having a fragile body, was extremely important for the ship's operation and thus posed a direct threat to its survival. It remembered an incident that happened 2 days earlier when an experiment managed to escape amid the chaos. She built a tracking device in a few hours that allowed capturing the guinea pig again. It admired her intelligence and even wondered if she had psychic abilities like those of the elven race known for powers like telepathy and mind control. Although occasionally, humans with psychic potential were born, it didn't matter to it whether she was talented or not. What mattered was that she was always accompanied by soldiers armed with advanced equipment. Facing her directly would be suicide. While devouring some protein bars, it developed a new ability. Paralytic poison was perfect for it. With its small and fragile body, a single drop could immobilize an adult human. For several minutes, it still recognized that it would be complicated to use it with armed soldiers around her. The scene then shifted to the morph. Visiting the slime again, it noticed that the slime seemed to be doing better than the day before and brought it food. The slime showed happiness when being fed. The amorph reflected that in the game, slimes usually didn't have special abilities. It wondered if this was a unique specimen or if the race had changed over time. At that moment, it remembered that Kisaragi had a cat to which she seemed extremely attached. Visiting the slime again, he noticed that the slime seemed better than the day before and brought it food. The slime showed happiness when fed. Love reflected that in the game, slimes usually didn't have special abilities. He wondered if this was a unique specimen or if the race had changed over time. At that moment, he remembered that Kisaragi had a cat she seemed extremely attached to. He thought that if something happened to the cat, maybe that would be her weak spot. Unlike him, the cat spent most of its time alone. Love decided he would use the animal as bait and hid in the ducts and spent a good while watching it. He discovered that the cat's name was Kaiser and also noticed it was a bit fat, a result of all the premium meat its owner fed it, so Kisaragi wasn't a bad person. Meanwhile, Love analyzed the duct entrance. Even though it looked easy to invade, his hypersense warned him that it was covered by laser sensors. Any interruption would trigger the alarm immediately. Irritated by this difficulty, he ended up banging and making noise in the vent. The cat heard the noise and came over to investigate. Shortly after, some soldiers rushed in to see what was happening, but concluded it was just the cat causing a ruckus. Still, the amorph got a huge scare when the cat looked at him so closely, nearly dying of fright. After barely escaping being discovered, he started thinking about a better plan. He noticed the cat looked bored and had an idea. He decided to use a cockroach to lure the animal. He brought the insect to the vent, which immediately caught the cat's attention. The feline followed the cockroach and ended up removing the vent cover. Again, the soldiers heard the noise, but one commented that it was probably just the cat again, so they didn't bother to check. The amorph then created a trail of cockroaches, leading the animal down a specific path. At the end of the trail, he was already waiting for it when the cat got close enough. He used his tail to inject it with paralyzing venom. The cat screamed in pain as it was attacked. Without hesitation, the amorph bit down hard on the feline's skull, crushing it. He commented to himself how tasty the meat was, not caring about the cruelty of the act. Meanwhile, on another part of the ship, some soldiers went to talk to Kisaragi. She wanted to know when she would see the cat again. The captain explained that the soldiers were looking for it, but she was extremely irritated. She said they had been searching for hours and that the cat had a feeding time, so something bad could have happened. The captain replied that there was no way the cat could have escaped the ship since it was a closed and controlled environment. She insisted that for that very reason, she wanted them to find it quickly. The captain asked her to wait for the results. However, he thought to himself that this woman was crazy for making such a fuss over a cat. If she weren't from the capital, he would have locked her up for causing so much trouble. The situation became even tenser when Kisaragi demanded that the soldiers who let the cat escape be executed. The captain was shocked by the request and couldn't believe what he was hearing. Everyone around was horrified to realize she really meant it. She justified it by saying that all of this happened because of their incompetence. Trying to calm the situation, the captain said he understood her feelings and promised to use the incident to reinforce discipline among the troops. Still, Kisaragi was firm and declared she would return in 2 hours. He warned that if there were no answers by then, he would have to resign as captain. As soon as he walked away, the captain started to wonder, where the hell would that damn cat be? Meanwhile, hidden in the vents, Love thought to himself, satisfied that the cat was already in his stomach. He realized he had gained a new feature called Wild Sense **. The though he wasn't exactly sure where it came from. The system he was using explained that there was a mechanism for merging features. He could combine related skills to form a more powerful version. Love remembered that from playing that game a lot, he had already memorized several fusion formulas from devouring the cat. A notification popped up. He was surprised since it was a skill he had never seen before. The system explained that Wild Sense could merge with the Hypersense he already had. By doing so, the Predator Instinct was born. This new feature made his Hypersense even sharper. Now he could sense imminent threats, something comparable to the instinct of great hunters who seem to foresee the future. He tried to activate this new power but noticed that the foresight effect wasn't manifesting. He then suspected it was a passive ability that would only activate in the presence of a real threat. He decided he would analyze that feature better later to understand its limits. He also wondered if Kisaragi was completely losing control. He watched her and realized she was truly out of her mind. Love reflected. Everything was going exactly as he wanted. He had reached his second goal, to create a barrier of tension between Kisaragi and her soldiers. He knew the soldiers no longer sympathized with her cat since they had seen it eat better than them. That was enough to breed resentment. He concluded that this situation fueled natural feelings of anger and rebellion, especially since Kisaragi belonged to the upper class of the Megacorp, a noble from the capital. For the soldiers, tolerating that difference in treatment was an absurd injustice, something that sowed the seeds of internal conflicts that he planned to exploit even more. The soldiers began to vent their rage toward Kisaragi's cat, but now that the animal had disappeared, the atmosphere became even tenser. They wondered what they would do from that moment on and felt the frustration of searching for a cat they secretly hated. It was humiliating for them to fail at something so simple, and that was eating away at everyone's patience. Meanwhile, Love reflected on whether those soldiers would still be able to protect Kisaragi Yujin with the same dedication as before. He also knew she no longer trusted them since, in her mind, the cat had escaped due to their incompetence. For Love that was perfect. He mentally thanked the cat, thinking it was now time to move on to the next step of his plan, to obtain the genetic fragments of Kisaragi Yujin at that moment. Kisaragi Yujin was so consumed by rage that she cruelly took it out on the lab test subjects. She approached Experiment 26, a fragile slime with a disturbing smile. She began to electrocute it, and from a distance, Love felt the anger growing inside him. He realized it was pointless to try to talk or act subtly. He knew the slime didn't need help or comfort. It needed revenge. Meanwhile, Kisaragi Yujin went to talk to the captain to demand results. She reminded him that 2 hours had already passed since she'd given her ultimatum. The captain replied they had just started the search. Trying to justify himself, she called him by his full name, Samuel Yu, making it clear she was questioning his authority. She wanted to know if he was defying the will of a noble from the capital. Samuel Juman maintained his composure. He asserted that he was the captain of that ship and warned Kisaragi Yujin to watch her arrogance. She retorted that she could very well remove him from his position, yet he replied he wouldn't be intimidated, no matter that she was from the capital. There was an obvious tension between them, a sign that the conflict had been building up for a while. Next, Kisaragi Yujin left the room with a group of soldiers. She said she was going to the bathroom, and one of the soldiers commented that he also urgently needed to go. Love realized this was her best opportunity. Normally, the guards had to accompany her, but they were so stressed and irritated that they let her go in alone. Plus, one of the guards really walked away to use the bathroom. This weakened security even more. She hid and waited, knowing there was no security device installed in the bathroom, making it the perfect spot for an ambush. She watched Kisaragi Yujin inside, evaluating every move. She kept telling herself she couldn't waste this opportunity. Determined, she entered the bathroom stealthily, preparing her lethal poison. At that moment, Kisaragi Yujin felt something strange. Her instincts alerted her of danger. When she looked up, she saw the morph already launching an attack and managed to dodge at the last moment. But he used the walls to propel himself and stabbed his tail into the back of her neck. The poison began to paralyze Kisaragi. Yujin immediately, while she was frozen but still conscious, saw the creature approach, drooling with anxiety. Love. I wondered what she was thinking at that moment and if she felt fear, realizing there was no escape. But for him, that didn't matter at all. He wondered what she was thinking at that moment and if she would feel fear, realizing there was no escape. But to him, that didn't matter. He knew his death was certain and inevitable. He moved forward without hesitation, washing his jaws in his mind until he crushed it completely. During the brutal act, he felt the flow of information, genetics passing to him. By absorbing that data, he confirmed that his suspicions were correct. Soon after, the system appeared before him, asking if he wanted to evolve. The moment he thought about confirming the evolution, he was hit by a strange and sudden vision of soldiers, bursting into the bathroom and riddling his body with bullets. He jolted and wondered what was happening until he understood that this was the function of his new ability, Predator Instinct. That power allowed him to foresee imminent dangers. He realized that time was working against him. A guard would arrive any moment and he would have no choice but to kill that man too. When the soldier entered the bathroom, he was startled to see Kisaragi Yuyin's body on the floor, but before he could react or scream, Love jumped on him and sank his fangs into his neck, killing him quickly. Still, he didn't feel safe. He thought about the time he had left before more arrived and wondered if Kisaragi Yuyin was carrying any tracking device he hadn't detected. He decided there was nothing more to do there. He needed to get out immediately. He ran back to the place he called his nest. It was a hideout in the ducks where he could take refuge for a moment. When he got there, he opened the system again and confirmed his evolution. The system informed him that the process had been activated at that moment. The skin of the Amorph began to melt and change color. His entire body underwent a painful and intense transformation until he was completely wrapped in a thick, durable cocoon. Inside the cocoon, he felt everything was different. It was like something was absorbing his old form and replacing it with something new. He wanted to open his eyes to see what was happening, but he couldn't move. Little by little, he completely lost control of his body inside the cocoon. He realized there was nothing more he could do. All that was left was to wait for his evolution to complete. After a while, Love finally began to emerge from that cocoon. His appearance was completely different. Now he was taller and stronger. With 4 arms and much darker and tougher skin, he felt the power flowing through his new body, noticing he had leveled up in his evolution. Meanwhile, in another part of the ship, the scene shifted to the infirmary. The team leader was asking if they had already discovered the cause of Kisaragi Yuin's death. One of the doctors responded that the apparent cause was a deep wound in the throat, probably made with a small blade, and that a complete autopsy would be necessary to be sure. The doctor asked what they should do next, but the captain admitted he didn't know. Then he turned to the head of security to ask how the investigation was progressing. The guard explained that they had reviewed all the ship's cameras, but there was nothing suspicious recorded. That's why the main suspect at that moment was the guard who was being interrogated. They asked him if he really believed the guard was the killer. The head of security replied that, according to the information he had, the captain doubted it a lot. He sighed and reminded everyone that they knew very well what had happened. Recently in the lab, he talked about one of the most promising employees, the one who had his brain ripped out while still alive just for disobeying the head of research. That served as a clear warning. Whoever disobeyed orders could have a horrible fate. The captain asked what punishment they thought awaited anyone considered responsible for the death of a noble from the capital. He made it clear that if they didn't want to die a cruel death, they needed to find a solution. Suggestions were made, and one man mentioned that they could claim the death was an accident during an experiment, but another rejected the idea, saying there were too many researchers involved, and it would be impossible to guarantee that everyone would give the same testimony. Someone suggested was inventing that she died from eating something spoiled, but everyone realized that would be political suicide. Tension rose, leading to a chaotic discussion. No one could reach a consensus. It was then that another man entered the room and ordered them to stop the commotion immediately. He informed the captain that they were approaching the planet Kocho, explaining that Kocho was known for being the territory of the space dogs, a feared group of pirates. The captain understood the gravity of the situation and asked if the man was saying they had gotten into trouble with them. The man confirmed it, explaining that with all the chaos aboard, they hadn't noticed it before. The space dogs were notorious enemies of the Megacorp, known for traveling through the cosmos, raiding everything they could. They had great experience in fleet battles, and even ships commanded by veterans suffered heavy losses. For a research ship like theirs, encountering the space dogs would be a total disaster. But the man suggested that if they reported an attack from those pirates, they could use that to cover up the death of Kisaragi Yuyin. The captain thought the idea was valid since they didn't have the firepower to face those pirates. The man insisted he had old contacts among the pirates and could talk to them. The captain was surprised to discover those ties and asked about the cost and details of the plan. The man estimated it would cost at least 100 million credits because Kisaragi Yuyin was important enough that even the pirates wouldn't want to complicate things. The captain accepted the plan but made it clear that this man would have to handle all the details on his own. One of the other men asked what they would do with the bodies. The captain decided they would keep them until the space dogs arrived, ordering that no one else approach and them to avoid problems. While all this was happening on the ship, Love reflected on its new form, perceiving that he was now in the larva stage and felt the bodily change intensely. Before he could survive hidden in the darkness, but now he knew he needed to hunt to stay alive. Carefully evaluating his next target, the system appeared before him, informing him that he had unlocked a new ability called ******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************� race had 6 stages: larva, pupa, young, adult, and ascension. Reaching ascension was like finishing the game. Space Survivor. Reaching that point not only meant achieving maximum power, but also unlocking the secret of the origins of the metamorphs, revealing who they really were and where they came from. He remembered that very few people had seen the end of a race. Only 20 players, including him, had managed such a feat. He knew it was something extremely difficult. As he analyzed his new features, the system offered him the option to view the list of evolutionary types. He accepted, noticing that his physical enhancement was at 6 out of 10, while his psychic enhancement was at 1.5. He wasn't surprised, as he knew he had almost completed the requirements to further boost his physical side, thanks to his reinforced exoskeleton and acid blood. The system explained that the evolutionary types worked similarly to classes of other races, but were more specific, activating only under special conditions, and could still provide energy bonuses when combined. But there was something that intrigued him. He didn't understand where that extra 0.5 in psychic enhancement came from. He took pride in completely consuming his prey, leaving nothing behind. Then he remembered Kisaragi Yuyin. She had been the only one whose body he hadn't completely devoured. The Amorph began to realize that his hunches about Kisaragi and Yuyin were correct. He suspected she possessed psychic powers, and everything pointed to that being true. He thought he really needed her body, so he had to find her as soon as possible while crawling through the ducts. He noticed that they were now narrower for him. His body had grown quite a bit since the last evolution, making it difficult to navigate tight spaces. Still, he kept moving until he smelled the corpses. Upon sensing that strong, rotten odor, he began to drool involuntarily. He knew he had finally found the place where the bodies were stored. Right beneath his feet was the makeshift morgue where a man making rounds rested. He commented on the foul smell coming from the place. He found a hole in the floor corroded by acid, but in the ceiling, hidden in the shadows, the Amorph was already waiting for him. Without giving him any chance to react, he attacked swiftly, piercing his head and killing him instantly. After that, he was able to examine the bodies calmly and found Kisaragi Yuyin's. He noticed that due to her noble status from the capital, her body was still intact. The soldiers had been ordered not to touch her. He held her head for a moment, reflecting. It seemed strange to him how he could kill so many people without feeling guilt. He wondered if he had been corrupted for being a shapeshifter, or if he had always been that kind of cold killer. In the end, he decided it wasn't worth thinking about since nothing would change. He knew that for shapeshifters, devouring the dead was simply the natural course of life. The body returned as food, nourishing those who survived. With that in mind, he began to devour Kisaragi Yuyin without hesitation, accepting that this was how a shapeshifter should live and adapt. During the process, he spat out something he found in her heart. It was a strange device. He observed it without fully understanding what it was for, and suspected it was some issue with her heart. So he just destroyed it without thinking too much, and soon after the system appeared before him and confirmed what he suspected. Kisaragi Yuyin really had psychic powers. The system informed him that he had them. He had acquired the ability of psychic perception and was asked if he wanted to activate it. The love wasn't very satisfied with the reward. He considered the ability almost useless, since shapeshifters could use psychic powers naturally without needing that specific perception. Still, he decided to accept the feature to meet the necessary requirements to unlock new evolutionary types. Upon activating the ability, he felt tentacles forming on his head. He found it curious and thought maybe later he could combine that new feature with others to get something really useful. He continued with his task. He took one of the arms from another corpse and used a nearby machine to help manipulate it. He planned to finish devouring the body of the guard he had killed earlier. After consuming the bodies, he noticed that the guard's shifts had changed. He observed that they weren't wearing much protection inside that ship and started to wonder if the doctor he had killed could also be replaced soon. He knew that the moment the replacement entered and saw the state of the place, they would realize there was a monster loose on the ship. He reflected that he wasn't strong enough yet to directly face everyone who was there. He needed to buy time, grow, and evolve even more before taking greater risks. Looking at the hole he had opened with acid, he had an idea. He was in a morgue filled with preservatives and chemicals, scattered everywhere. He imagined creative ways to use all of that to his advantage, thinking about how to turn the environment into a trap or cover for his actions. At that point, the narrative changed scenes, showing the power center of the Megacorp. Even though there wasn't an officially declared capital, there was a place everyone recognized as such, the land that served as the administrative headquarters of the Megacorp. This planet was governed by 5 powerful families that had helped found the corporation, acting as kings over the territory. Among those families was the Eugen family, whose roots came from a region that was once called East Asia. They had started with a small business in South Korea and now dominated the entire territory, turning it into their private residence. To maintain comfort and status, they installed private planes, magnetic levitation trains for fast transport, and even an artificial sun to sustain the lower ecosystem. Millions of workers lived there like obedient instruments to keep everything running. The scene then showed a man cultivating the land, pretending to be humble, but soon two suited men approached him to deliver a message. One of them explained that they had taken a while to locate the important man and needed to speak with him urgently. They told him that Miss Kisaragi Yu-yin, the third daughter of the family, had her transmitter completely destroyed by the man in white, who until then seemed calm, reacted with brutal coldness, saying that this couldn't have happened. Since he didn't overload Kisaragi Yujin with too many tasks, they informed him that the last signal from the transmitter came from an area near the Kacho sector known to be the territory of the space dogs at that moment. The kind man completely changed, killed the messenger, violently showing a cold and controlled rage, then ordered the other suited men to clean up the mess, explaining that he didn't need tools that asked questions, for which he hadn't asked for answers. He calmly explained that the cost to create Kisaragi Yu-yin had been extremely high, around 1 billion credits, comparable to the value of a prototype warship, also including advanced genetic modifications. He wondered how simple pirates would dare to lay their hands on something so valuable to the Yu-yin family. Then he asked if the ship Kisaragi Yu-yin was commanded by Samuel Yu. An old man beside him confirmed it, commented that Samuel Yu's family lived near Titan, one of Saturn's moons. He said that although they had interest in those lands, he didn't believe that attack came from them, since he considered the leader of that family a coward, lacking the courage to confront the Yu-yin directly. Finally, he looked at the old man and asked what he thought of the whole situation, wanting to hear an opinion that confirmed his own plans or fears about what would happen next. The old man calmly explained that he had already suspected the involvement of Tech. The boss agreed, saying that great minds think alike, although it seemed that Tech and the Edgerton family of Samuel were competing for control of Jupiter. They were actually conspiring together for a long time, since Egerton's credits came from Tech. He recounted that this snake was planning to take control before the council meeting, asked if the old man already knew this. The old man confirmed, saying that the leader of the Tech family, Chamberlain, wanted to take the CEO position that rightly belonged to him. The boss commented that this arrogant brat clearly had him in his sights and said that now they had justification to strike first. Next, he ordered the elder to notify the entire family, since they had a shadow embedded near the hideout, and asked him to contact those people to resolve everything. The elder understood, although he reflected that there would be bloodshed. Still, the boss insisted on bringing everyone in without exception, including Samuel, to his feet, stating that everyone who damaged his property deserved death. The scene shifted to the interior of a spaceship, where the captain was horrified, asking what had happened there. A soldier explained he saw some smoke. He went to check for fire and tried to enter immediately, but only the medics had permission to do so. He commented that he didn't understand how there could be fire if there were corpses. The man asked if those were all the bodies, and a woman responded yes, questioning the reason for the question at that moment. The head of the medical team was horrified and asked the captain to gather all the team leaders immediately. Something terrible had happened at the meeting. The captain couldn't believe that the body of the head of research had disappeared. He asked the chief medic, who claimed to have checked all the bodies several times and confirmed that 2 were missing, explaining that, considering the chemicals, a fire could occur, but it was something very rare. The risk leader then summarized, saying that in other words, this had been a criminal incident. Everyone started wondering who could have done something like this, and one man even suggested it might be an alien organism. The chief of his minister was stunned and asked if he was serious, but soon everyone agreed that the most important thing now was that the body of the research leader had disappeared. The doubt arose whether they should search for the pirates of the hideout. The captain stated they needed to find the body as soon as possible, but first, they had to identify the culprit. Completely nervous, he said that if they feared retaliation from the noble capital, they needed to cooperate with him. He asked the risk chief if he had already contacted the capital, and the chief confirmed that he had done so right after the meeting. The captain ordered that they mention nothing about what had happened and simply find the body as soon as possible, reminding the security chief what he needed to do. He emphasized that the culprit had to be found at any cost. The security chief responded that he was already doing his best, but the captain retorted that it wasn't enough, and threatened to take away his authority and respect if he didn't solve the problem. Meanwhile, Love was hiding in the vents, watching and thinking that everything was going wrong. Perfectly as he had planned, he reflected on how no one would suspect that an alien would mix chemicals in a morgue to start a fire after mixing the products. He even used some drops of his acidic blood, ensuring that the bodies were destroyed efficiently. The Amorphous being admitted to himself that he didn't expect anyone to mention the possibility of an alien being involved, and noticed that the risk team leader had taken control of the investigation. He suspected that he might be collaborating with the pirates, which would be interesting, since the pirates were of various races and he could obtain many different genes. Still, he noted that the fragments he would get on that ship would be less than expected due to the attack. Suddenly, he realized that someone was approaching. It was the supplies department leader. Since he had no direct involvement with the incident, Amer was surprised he was so worried. He observed how the nervous man was looking around and entering the cargo hold. Amer reflected that as the supplies chief, he had authorization to be there, but his overly cautious behavior seemed suspicious. He then wondered what kind of secret that man was hiding and followed his trail, and to a container with much stricter security measures than the others. The walls were so thick that even Amor's hypersense couldn't penetrate them. He thought the contents must be something very important. Originally, his target was the medical team leader, but he ended up changing his mind and decided his next target would be the supplies leader. Meanwhile, the scene showed the supplies department head drinking excessively. One of the men even told him to slow down a bit. In his thoughts, the leader lamented as he felt ruined, since he trusted the promises of a member of a black market cult. He had been seduced by the idea that he could sell something rare he found in some ancient ruins. It seemed easy and profitable until the day of the deal when he secretly transported the eggs. Unfortunately, one of them fell, and he knew that if only he had closed the container door properly that day, none of this would have happened. The supplies chief thought to himself that he couldn't tell anyone anything. If the captain found out, he was sure he would be killed. To try to forget about it, he ordered another drink, but the bartender informed him they had already closed. Still, he insisted, asking for just one more so he could leave, and the man ended up accepting. After drinking, he stumbled through the dark corridors of the ship, completely drunk, wondering where he had gone wrong in life. Suddenly, he heard a step and, scared, asked who was there. At that moment, he saw Amor's legs running across the floor. He panicked and fled, pleading for his life, hurriedly typing in the password, and managed to enter a room saying he needed to talk to someone as soon as possible. However, Amor managed to force his way into the room. Without thinking twice, he moved forward and completely devoured the man, then reflected that the target had a very predictable routine, which made everything easier. He thought the captain should thank him after all. He was helping to reduce the crew's salary costs. Then he noticed he had left a lot of mess on the floor and was having trouble finding the ID card while searching. He saw a picture of a woman in a bikini stuck to the wall and found her very pretty and attractive, but he commented to himself that in his current state he felt absolutely nothing. He finally found the ID card and ripped the man's hand off to guarantee access to the systems, saying to himself that now he had everything he needed, but first he had to clean up that mess. He started devouring the rest of the body, mumbling that the taste was average. Since the smell of alcohol was very strong, he finished and used the card to open a container with reinforced security. Inside, he discovered several freezers and realized that the man was a smuggler. It was then that he found the metamorph eggs and noticed that one of them was empty. He concluded that he himself had come out of that egg and that the man had tried to smuggle him. He reflected that in the game, the starting place of a metamorpho wasn't a spaceship, but ancient, forgotten ruins. He imagined that when that creature was born, it must have walked a bit before dying from malnutrition. The moment when its consciousness took over the body, that explained why he found cockroaches so tasty. It was pure survival instinct. For a moment, he held a minute of silence for the creature that died to make room for him, but soon commented that he would now act like the true metamorpho he was. Then he began to devour all the metamorph eggs that were there. After fully feeding, he noticed there were still many things to eat inside the container and continued devouring everything. Then the internal system issued an update. His physical enhancement was just 2 points away from leveling up. Plus, he obtained a new feature called Mimido. He thought he had felt disappointed after devouring Kizaragi since he only obtained a limited psychic perception, but on the other hand, the supply chief had given him a much more valuable gift. In the game, features like that only appeared from the middle to the end of the campaign, and were extremely effective for killing enemies. With those new abilities, he could move much more aggressively. He knew there wasn't much time left until the meeting of the so-called space dogs, and he needed to make himself as strong as possible before they arrived. In his cold and cruel thoughts, he commented that the screams of the people on that ship, they wouldn't be heard by anyone and would remain buried in the darkness of the abyss. Then the scene changed. To the unloading compartment of the Megacorp research ship, a man called out to Scott, saying it was time for dinner. Scott replied that he would be there soon, but wanted to finish what he was doing first. The man asked if he had much left, and Scott replied just enough to get an extra in another scene while they ate. Scott asked why they wanted them to check the jets. His friend replied that he was really going to keep talking about work. Even at dinner, Scott insisted that Fincher think about it, commenting that he had heard rumors they were gearing up to face the metal giants. Pinchy replied saying if that was true, everyone was doomed. Scott then explained that the green lilies were already on board and asked if he hadn't noticed the strange smell in the air lately. It was typical of them. He recounted that a friend told him people had been disappearing since last week, but Fincher didn't believe him at that moment. Another man appeared and said he had also heard those rumors and confirmed that the supply leader had disappeared. He also commented that the cargo compartment leader had been promoted to lead the team. Fisher asked if that was for real, and Scott confirmed. Fisher asked why, if people were disappearing, the higher-ups were doing nothing, and the other man replied it was to avoid causing panic. Fincher then asked what all the fuss was about with the jets, but the man admitted he didn't know for sure. He had only heard about the disappearances. The scene returned to Scott, who was working again. Fincher asked him if he wanted a snack for the end of the night, but Scott said he didn't need one, and only asked for a synthetic drink if there was any available after a while focused on the service. Someone called him. Scott asked if it was Cameron, but the person said he was busy. Still, the voice insisted. Scott crawled out from under the jet to check, but found no one there in front, confused. He asked why they had called him and disappeared, but a dark voice began calling him from the shadows. Scott walked toward the dark spot and noticed everything was off. He heard a voice saying it was looking for something without suspecting anything. Scott ventured further into the environment and soon smelled a very strong odor. He asked where the person was, but the voice replied it was right in front of him. When he tried to move, he slipped on a screw on the ground. In that instant, he realized something was very wrong. Since it made no sense for Cameron to be in that total darkness, he recalled the stories about people who had disappeared there. But it was already too late. Love was right behind him and grabbed him by the head, devouring him without hesitation, showing it spared no one. Shortly after, Fincher appeared bringing juice for Scott, but noticed he was no longer there. He heard Scott's voice saying he was in the repair compartments as he entered the place. Fincher only saw a flashlight on the ground when something fell on the back of his neck. He checked and realized it was blood. Looking up, he saw the morph holding Scott's head, and then love consumed Fincher as well, reflecting that he had a lot of talent for hunting and that his mimicking ability could imitate human voices. It was being very useful among the creatures transported in the smuggling container. There was a larva of a so-called red worm, a type of giant worm that lived only on desert planets and possessed the ability to mimic the voices of other creatures. Eating that larva gave the morph an essential skill for its hunting. Despite that, the imitation was still not perfect since it could only reproduce the voice of the last creature it had consumed. Still, it considered this acquisition very valuable. It thought that the next day it would need to feed on someone from the kitchen, and that it could mimic Cameron again. In the midst of those thoughts, it wondered if the slime. Was it okay to just call it slime? It felt strange, so it decided that from now on it would call it number 26. It thought about making a quick visit to its nest at that moment. Number 26 communicated with him telepathically. The morph was surprised to notice that psychic perception could be used that way. It responded to the slime's greeting, heard that it was very hungry that day. The morph was scared to notice how much number 26's vocabulary had increased. It felt guilty for not having gotten food for it that day and explained that the roads were too dangerous after several people disappeared. The security chief had reinforced surveillance in the lab and the upper ducts, which were now very risky. That's why it told the slime to hang on a little longer. It thought that when number 26 evolved into a pupa, it could help it. The problem was that the conditions for evolution were strict. It would need to eliminate and consume 10 individuals from each of 2 intelligent races, but there were only humans on that ship, making that impossible. There were also the pirates, but it didn't know much about them. While reflecting, the morph sensed that the risk management chief was talking to someone. The chief said that in any case, everything had gone well since Kisaragi had been eliminated and the ship would reach the target point as planned. He commented that if that was the will of Master Young, Yujin, he would accept it proudly. The morph thought that man was very cunning like a fox and seemed to have much greater plans. At another point, the captain asked the security chief how they were handling things. The chief explained that even with more cameras and guards, they couldn't resolve the problem. The captain asked how many people had disappeared, and he replied that there were 8 inches total, being 7 after the team leader's death. The love was enjoying their desperation. Laughing inside, the risk boss commented that for human standards, no one could hide for that long. Even though the metal gremlins were only considered rumors, he believed some unknown entity was behind it. Another man said that if it were an animal, they would have captured it by now. But the risk boss replied that the supply chief's container freezers were all empty. He asked where all that had gone. The captain then asked if they were really being attacked. Where would that creature be? The risk boss suggested there were still unverified places. Like the ventilation ducts, the love thought that man's name was Arnold and he should have killed him faster. The men discussed that if the Amorph had consumed the research leader's body, they would be in great danger and probably they would have to face those pirates. The captain then asked how many soldiers would be needed, and the risk boss replied that they would need 6 or 8 squads to handle the situation. The captain then gave the go-ahead for the plan to move forward. The love reflected that the confrontation was now inevitable, and that even if he came out of the nest, he wouldn't have anywhere to run. The time had come to make a tough decision between fleeing or fighting. He remembered all of Arnold's words, felt intense anger, and wondered if they considered him just a common beast. He knew that wasn't the case. He was a hostile alien attacking the necks of his enemies, and a great metamorph decided he would fight and show them how foolish they were for wanting to confront him in the narrow ducts of the ship. Activating his hypersense, the Amorph began to analyze every inch of that environment. To him, it was like the ship was a living organism, and he was a parasitic infiltrator. He detected that Captain Samuel and the other leaders were gathered on the command bridge. Meanwhile, armed soldiers were moving in preparation. He concluded that the base plan was already ready, but he still needed to adjust a few details. It was time to pay a visit to his guests in the operations room of Sector B. The soldiers were organizing to invade the duct. Arnold thought that this monster had probably also killed Kisaragi. They needed to eliminate all possible variables and couldn't allow any delays before Miss Sunju's arrival. It was clear that this monster had to die before the day ended. The soldiers split into small teams to explore the ducts. Arnold warned everyone that the path was very complex and required caution. At one point, he noticed that the B3 camera was no longer transmitting normally and indicated that it should be checked. He ordered B2 to regroup with B3, coordinating for both groups to move together through the cameras. They could see the teams meeting, and that's when the shouting began. Arnold immediately asked what was happening. The B2 team responded desperately that the creature had appeared at the operations support. They reported that they had lost contact with the B2, and confusion grew as the images showed nothing clearly. Everything had happened too quickly. They couldn't confirm anything concrete. The support asked why the risk management chief was frozen, and Arnold wondered how that creature had managed to attack so fast. A soldier in reinforced armor shouldn't be taken down so easily. Not even a highly skilled assassin could pull that off. He concluded they had underestimated the enemy, who clearly wasn't a wild animal. Then Arnold ordered the communications leader to relay orders to everyone. If they saw anything moving, they had to open fire immediately. He requested that Team B3 meet up with B1 and head out to search for B2. Still, Arnold thought that at the rate they were going, they'd be taken out one by one. As B3 approached B1, the B1 team reported that they were hearing a strange noise. The control room asked for more details, but they couldn't explain it well. They just said it sounded like something was getting closer. An operator quickly corrected them, saying the sound was coming from B3 since they were hearing their voices, which brought relief to everyone in the control room. However, suddenly B1 started screaming, warning that B3 had been attacked by the enemy. Arnold put on the headset and identified himself as the leader, demanding more detailed explanations, but the soldiers could only say everything happened so fast. He got furious, asking if everyone was an idiot for not seeing what was right in front of them. Filled with rage, he threw the headset on the ground, frustrated because it all seemed impossible. He pondered how this could be happening without leaving traces on the cameras unless the monster was deliberately avoiding being recorded. Then he thought of something, picked up the headset again, and asked Team and one to state their name and rank. At that moment, the one who responded was Amor himself, smiling with satisfaction for having fooled everyone. The soldiers looked horrified as Amor's claws appeared on the camera and destroyed the equipment. Everyone in the control room was in shock at what they saw. Shortly after, Arnold tried to reorganize the situation. Amor, for his part, was satisfied. He had eliminated Team B and had also gathered information about number 26. Through the intercepted conversations, he mentally explained that due to the waves transmitted by Team B3's communication, they got confused, facilitating his ambush. He also recalled that one of the soldiers who stayed behind to repair the radio was incapacitated by him using his neurotoxin gland, which made everything even easier for filling his stomach. Now he was thinking about the next objectives. The team activated their hypersense again to locate them and found them advancing on high alert. The Amorphous one noticed they already knew it could imitate human voices, which required a change in strategy as they observed the path the team took. As he had previously traveled, he noticed a fork where they had recently passed and smiled maliciously. Thinking that knowledge was power and knowing a little more than the other could be a deadly poison, meanwhile, Arnold warned everyone that the enemy could imitate human voices and they should fire immediately if they heard any call for help. It was then that Team A heard a human voice calling for help. Without hesitation, they opened fire in the direction of the sound. At that moment, the Amorphous one could be seen running, smiling for having deceived them, and spread terror. Once again among the soldiers, one of them requested to stop firing upon realizing the risk, but the Amorphous one was already behind one of them and attacked without hesitation. The soldiers panicked when they noticed it was using their teammate as a human shield. Shooting meant injuring or killing their own ally. Still, Arnold ordered them to fire. They obeyed and opened fire, but the Amorphous one managed to escape. Arnold made it clear to everyone that retreat was not allowed, and that the enemy had to be captured at all costs. The soldiers approached Latcher's body to try to help him, noticing he was seriously injured. They also saw that the monster seemed to have been hit by some shots, but they had no idea what kind of creature they were facing. Soon, they reached a very narrow duct and asked what they should do. One of them requested permission to inject the enhancer. The team leader authorized him, and then they activated the enhancement, becoming much stronger and more confident, promising to crush the monster. Continuing through the passage, they noticed a large hole in the ventilation duct and concluded that the creature must have gone down there. At that moment, the Amorphous one appeared behind them. It attacked one of the soldiers, held his head tightly, and slammed it against the ground, killing him. Another soldier reacted by shooting at the Amorphous one, even with his own friend in the line of fire, resulting in his companion's immediate death. That soldier dropped his weapon and tried to punch the Amorphous one, but it managed to escape quickly, leaving the soldier furious. The Amorphous One reflected that these soldiers were stronger than he had imagined, even with the reinforcement. This was very different from what he expected. It wasn't like in the game. He understood he would have to change strategy once again. Thinking of alternatives, he decided to do something he hadn't tried yet. He returned to the soldier he had wounded before and devoured him completely, telling himself that this was more than enough. That way, the others would notice that Latchers had been ambushed. After that, he destroyed the soldier's chamber with a kick in the control room, and the alarm went off. They said the Aiders had been attacked by the monster. Shortly after, another soldier approached the Ganetrez to check if it was okay. When he tried to help his friend, the amorphous creature struck from behind and injected poison into his throat, paralyzing him completely. The man was frozen, unable to react, watching in horror as the amorphous creature devoured his companion. Right away, the amorphous creature grabbed that soldier too, saying it was his turn now, and brutally ripped off his head. Everyone in the control room was terrified, wondering what kind of demon that was. Many there began to believe that they were all going to die. Meanwhile, the amorphous creature reflected on how the enemy would react to all this. He knew there were still about 90 soldiers and officers on the ship, and now that he had revealed himself, they would attack him with all their strength. He understood that the biggest problem on that ship was the weapons the humans had. He knew there were even plasma weapons on board, which posed a great danger to him. Plasma weapons were extremely powerful, used for fleet battles, capable of destroying warships and tanks even though they were large and difficult to carry individually. There were lighter versions, but they were absurdly expensive. He suspected that at best, they might have medium-weight plasma launchers. Observing the armament of that ship, he still wasn't sure if they actually possessed those weapons. He noticed that the soldiers were heading to the agriculture section and thought that was perfect. It was his best chance. While the enemy searched in the wrong place, he would go after the leaders. He knew that by eliminating them, he would cause great chaos. More importantly, he needed to kill Arnold as soon as possible. Meanwhile, on another part of the ship, the captain asked Arnold where that creature had come from. Arnold explained that there was an unidentified life form recorded by the supply officer. The amorphous creature thought that in space, reinforcement equipment was essential, which is why people spent so much money on it. Arnold then told the other leaders that the enemy was a very intelligent life form capable of mimicking human voices, and that in combat, gathering information was the most important thing. He finally made a bold request for permission to use the squad's plasma launchers. The other leaders were shocked, saying he was crazy since they had decided to use those weapons only against pirates. The amorphous creature then understood that his doubts were resolved. They really did possess those weapons, and while the leaders argued and couldn't reach an agreement, he realized that this was the perfect moment to attack and eliminate everyone with his charge. His priority was Arnold, but he was still far from him. He decided that his next target would be the man who had tormented number 26. Without wasting any time, he approached the gathered leaders. His first victim was the researcher dude, whom he attacked brutally, completely devouring his head, leaving everyone present traumatized by the horror they were witnessing. Shortly after, the amorphous creature. He went to kill the other leaders gathered in the command center amid the chaos. Some asked the communications soldier to alert all soldiers about the attack, but before he could transmit anything, warning, the amorphous killed him brutally with a bite at that moment. Arnold shot at the back of the amorphous. The amorphous contemptuously thought that Arnold actually believed he would flee after witnessing that massacre, and wondered what he thought he was doing there. Without any enhancement gear, he decided that if Arnold wanted to die, he would fulfill that wish himself, but when the amorphous moved in to attack him, he had a precognitive vision of the future, and saw Arnold pulling out an extremely powerful weapon, capable of killing him with a single shot. Fear overtook him as he realized it was a plasma gun, absurdly expensive. A lethal weapon if it hit him in the head. With that, he understood that Arnold must have ties to some major house or powerful faction like the Eugene. Arnold then spoke directly to the amorphous, saying he had already figured out his plan. He pulled out the plasma gun, leaving everyone terrified by the weapon. He said he didn't know the identity of that creature but found it very interesting. How the monster reminded him of his master, the famous Shi Hyun Yu, without hesitation. Arnold began shooting at the amorphous's head. The amorphous understood that the situation was very dangerous for him. Even though he had been through tough situations before, he always found a way to win as a metamorph. He didn't care about that mentioned master because who would welcome him now would be himself. He reflected that animals like bears, lions, and wolves were often portrayed by the media as fierce incarnations of violence, but in reality, predators were big cowards who avoided direct fights whenever they could for him. That was the true instinct of a hunter during the time he played as a metamorph. He had learned that lesson well. It didn't matter how strong or smart someone was, prudence was useless without caution. While dodging Arnold's plasma shots, the amorphous perceived how the enemy's heart beat unevenly. He smelled the scent of a true predator emanating from him. The amorphous quickly left the line of fire and hid. The other leaders were asking Arnold to be careful, since he was inside the command center still. Arnold calmly and sarcastically stated that he would be careful. Arnold then communicated with all the teams, notifying that the monster had invaded the command center and ordering all soldiers to head there as quickly as possible. The Amorphous realized he was just buying time to protect the captain and the other leaders. He knew he had to end it all before reinforcements arrived. He grabbed a fire extinguisher, thinking it could be very useful. He used the extinguisher to fill the area with dense smoke, leaving everyone blind. The soldiers, they started complaining that they couldn't see anything, while Arnold was furiously shouting, asking if their weapons were just for show in the middle of the smoke. The Amorphous one took advantage of his sharp perception, managed to attack, and devour one of the people there without being seen. One of the soldiers then asked where the captain was. Suddenly, a voice responded, saying that the captain wasn't there and that he needed to go look for him. It was a trap. Arnold tried to warn the men not to be fooled by those dirty tactics, but the Amorphous one was already after another target, which he also killed. One of the blonde soldiers looked confused, hearing two different voices giving orders and didn't know who to trust anymore. One voice insisted he shoot quickly, accusing the other of trying to trick him in the confusion. The blonde man ended up shooting Arnold in the arm instead of hitting the Amorphous one, but Arnold quickly realized where the Amorphous one was and shot in that direction. He almost hit him in the head, but then the Amorphous one activated his wings, flying to dodge the shots. He lunged directly at Arnold, finally managing to completely devour his head. Soon after, he appeared in front of the blonde soldier who was still alive to increase the terror. He emerged with Arnold's head between his teeth, just when the soldier thought he was about to be killed. The Amorphous one simply turned around and left. As he moved away, he thought that he would actually like to have the pleasure of tearing that man's flesh right there, but he didn't have time for that. His nest was sending clear signals that he needed to flee as fast as possible. The captain watched the scene with irritation, asking why they were taking so long and ordering them to clean up the mess as soon as possible. At that moment, the leader of the medical team reported that the victims had already been identified. The captain asked if there were any survivors. The doctor explained that there were none, except for the research leader, 80 Wei. The captain looked confused when he asked if he was dead, but the doctor explained that 80 Wei was still alive, although hospitalized in recovery. He had been lucky enough to be immune to the monster's neurotoxins, but he would still suffer permanent damage to his sight, smell, and taste. Even if he survived, he'd have to be intubated for the rest of his life. The doctor wondered why the captain simply hadn't surrendered to the pirates, but the captain wouldn't accept that idea in any way. Still, he understood the harsh reality. Many people had died, and the survivors were few. They were no longer in a position to face the pirates in combat. He began to wonder if he should just abandon everything and flee. At that moment, a soldier appeared saying he had found an unusual weapon. When the captain took the equipment, he noticed it was actually an excellent weapon and it was loaded to 60%. He felt satisfied with that, but thought he couldn't trust anyone in that situation. He'd have to take care of himself, because there was a dangerous creature on the loose and the pirates were about to arrive. Meanwhile, Love. He reflected on what he had done, concluding that he had already eliminated almost all the important targets. Only Samuel was left, but he decided to ignore it for now. He believed it was time to expand his nest. He knew he could have up to 3 nests in different locations, and he wanted to choose wisely where to place them. His priority would be the dining area. Since controlling food was essential for human survival, he could even contaminate the supplies. Then he planned to establish another nest in the arsenal, where the plasma launcher was located, a weapon dangerous enough to kill him quickly. There was also the lab that stored large amounts of genetic samples. Although the chance of gaining a new trait, there was only 10% with the selenium present in the area. He could rely on the pupa ability and prepare better against the pirates. He decided to place nests in the dining area and the lab. Plus, to steal the plasma launcher, even though he hadn't planned to use it. Arnold's words kept resonating in his mind. He didn't know who this Eugen was or what he did, but he imagined he could come with the pirates or even infiltrate among them for love. There was nothing more dangerous than an enemy with an unknown identity, so he needed to have tricks up his sleeve. While he thought about this, number 26 appeared to talk to him. Love noticed he seemed happy and asked if they hadn't done experiments that day. Number 26 confirmed, saying yes. He was happy because he felt no pain. Taking advantage of everyone hiding, Love decided it was a good time to act. He moved down the hallway, passing through a laser sensor. He waited 30 minutes without anyone showing up, which confirmed the way was clear. He wouldn't have to crawl stealthily anymore. When he found number 26, he noticed he had a healthy color, but he knew he would starve if he stayed locked up there. Love thought that slimes ate everything and were immune to toxins, so taking number 26 to the nest wouldn't be a problem. He invited the slime to get out of there, telling him there was a place outside that lab. Number 26 eagerly accepted, so Love finally saved his companion, but asked him to wait a bit since he first needed to prepare the nest. Then he started spreading his slime all over the lab, knowing the humans wouldn't be able to use it afterward. Satisfied with his work, He felt an intense hunger and without hesitation, devoured the brains stored there, along with all the animals and experiments. He even shared the food with number 26, who was enjoying everything. At that moment, Love noticed soldiers approaching along with a researcher. As soon as the two entered the lab, they were immediately scared upon seeing the state of the place. Completely covered in slime and destroyed without giving them a chance to react, the amorphous creature attacked the soldier first, killing him quickly. Then it lunged at the researcher, who fell to his knees begging for mercy. When the amorphous creature took the man's head, number 26 said he felt a lot of pain just looking at him. The amorphous creature understood why, realizing that this man was involved in the experiments that had tortured number 26. Filled with rage, he offered the slime the chance to finish off the researcher without hesitation. Number 26 wrapped around the man's head and completely melted it, consuming it, while the researcher screamed in agony. After the man's death, and then after feeding a bit more, the amorphous creature saw that the system appeared before him, offering the chance to unlock the type of physical enhancement. It seemed like great luck, since he had achieved that result earlier than expected. Without thinking much, he accepted the evolution. His body went through a painful and intense transformation, becoming more solid, robust, and much larger in size. Number 26 commented, impressed, that he was huge. The amorphous creature replied that he had grown, comparing himself to a baby growing into an adult. Number 26, curious, asked what that meant, and the amorphous creature simply explained that now he was like a big baby. The slime accepted that explanation and started calling him that innocently. The amorphous creature even admitted to himself that the nickname wasn't entirely wrong. Since he was still a kind of larva, then he felt that his body was more resilient and solid. His height had increased quite a bit, which made him feel more confident for future battles. After getting used to the transformation, he reviewed his new features. He had acquired natural regeneration, piercing tentacles, and contamination organs. The natural regeneration ability merged with his enhanced vitality, creating an advanced regeneration power, which was excellent for him. Despite that, he recognized that there was a significant penalty, and for a slime, unlocking new types was theoretically unlimited, but the requirements increased with each evolution. For example, if he first acquired psychic enhancement, the requirement for physical would go from 10 to 20. He knew that under normal conditions, he could plan the speed of his evolution well, but in the midst of that crisis, he had no time for complex strategies. That's why he decided to postpone the next unlocking for later and focused on testing his new abilities. He evaluated the piercing tentacles, and noticed that although fragile on their own, combined with physical enhancement, they became lethal weapons. Then he analyzed the contamination organ, seeing that it would be very useful for him, since it could generate spores that secreted acid, making it possible to take control of the whole ship by contaminating every corner. That would be a huge advantage against tough enemies to defeat directly. Once he finished testing everything, decided to head to his next destination. The cargo area. Number 26 asked where they were going, and Love explained the plan, reflecting on how humans would react to seeing him that size. The scene shifted to the hallway of the cargo area, where all the humans were running in panic, screaming about that monstrous thing approaching. Desperately, they tried to close the security door, but Love was faster. Stopping it before it could close completely, he forced his way in and found many people hiding inside. Without hesitation, he lunged at them, killing everyone he found in the enclosure. Meanwhile, at another point, a severely injured researcher reflected on his situation, noticing that he could no longer feel the footsteps of the doctors around him. He wondered what was happening, thinking it would be better to die soon than to keep living in that miserable state. It was then that he heard footsteps approaching and for a moment believed they were soldiers coming to help him, but he quickly realized it was Love. Love pressed a button to open the compartment where he was, exposing the defenseless researcher. Number 26 then took control and once again consumed the man's head, completely melting it away. The researcher panicked, screaming that his head was on fire, and begged to be killed quickly, but the process was slow and painful, lasting nearly 3 hours. When it was over, Love asked number 26 if he was satisfied and how it felt to get revenge, but number 26, not understanding the concept of revenge, innocently replied that the food was really good for him. Love reflected on number 26, noticing that he didn't show complex emotions like revenge, wondering if the slime was truly incapable of feeling such a thing or if he simply hadn't learned it yet. That doubt reminded him of something curious. The researchers showed a strange interest in that slime, wondering if number 26 could someday evolve into something much more dangerous, like a sea demon. He explained that sea demons existed only on water planets, measured over 25 meters long, and had enormous tentacles spread across their bodies. In the game itself, they looked a lot like slimes, so much so that many players suspected a connection between the two species. The company responsible for the game just said it was a design flaw, but who could guarantee there wasn't something real behind that? While thinking about it, Love assessed the progress of his nest expansion. satisfied to see that everything was progressing as expected, he now needed to decide who his next prey would be. The scene then shifted to the territory of the Space Dog Cartel and the Cacho from space. Changing to the territory of the Space Dog Cartel and Cacho from space. Screams for help could already be heard coming from a ship. Inside, two men were holding a woman pleading for help, desperately calling for her husband. The husband in panic begged them to let her go, but ended up getting shot in the back, falling dead to the ground. The criminals looted everything they found in the ship, and between cruel laughs, they claimed they could do whatever they wanted with the women, but that all the men had to die. They said that was the cartel's motto. Watching all that brutality, there was a distinct figure, an imposing humanoid cyber lion, silently watching with a cold expression. He was the boss of the cartel. One of the men in the group murmured nervously how the boss could do this to them, since they were only hired as mercenaries. But the boss despised any doubt, calling them idiots and naive. Another pirate remembered that the protection force should have received the distress signal and that when they arrived, they would all be executed. The boss, however, showed no fear. On the contrary, he mocked the situation with a psychopathic smile on his face. He explained that according to Megacorp laws, mercenaries who broke contracts committed crimes, but if there were no witnesses, the crime simply didn't exist. For him, calling the protection force was a total waste of time since no one would be left alive to tell the story. The boss calmly got up and took a knife, cruelly stating that his hobby was skinning the pigs from the Megacorp. Without hesitation, he killed the ship's captain, who was already surrendered. After that, he authorized his men to take whatever they wanted while organizing the looting. The boss thought out loud if they would still have more work. That day, he decided it wasn't worth worrying and asked for a prisoner named Aloe. When Aloe was brought before him, the boss demanded explanations, remembering that she had said she had a job that day. The scared woman explained that she needed to communicate with someone via a remote connection, but the contact had been abruptly interrupted. The boss got furious and demanded more details. She explained that the one who requested the contact was Captain Samuel. Along with the research team, they wanted to obtain a specific body. Surprised, the boss asked if she knew whose body it was. She replied that it belonged to a woman from the Yu Yin family, a noble, very important family. In the last contact, they had offered 1,000,000 credits for the body. The boss was thoughtful upon hearing that. It seemed crazy to him to pay so much for a corpse, but he sensed conspiracy in the air. He knew that the Megacorp was changing its stance, and there were rumors that the old Terex clan, to which the Yu Yin family belonged, was being threatened by the new Eden clan from Mars. The Eden clan was known for the advanced development of starships, but under the table, they also worked with genetic modifications. A body from the Yu Yin family could contain valuable alterations worth tens of millions on the black market. The boss saw that as a business opportunity and also a chance to get revenge on the Eden clan that had destroyed part of his life in the past. Despite all those thoughts, he admitted to himself that at the end of the day, money was money. He asked Aloe if the problem with the contact could have been some interference, but she replied that she wasn't sure. The boss then smiled threateningly, saying that the Megacorp was operating in his territory without even asking for permission. Even though he didn't know exactly who the enemy was, he admitted they were very bold and ordered his crew to start immediately. He ordered the tracking of all communications without hesitation and commanded them to blow up the ship they were on to eliminate evidence. And he left with his fleet toward the ship where Samuel was at that moment, the alien, one of the sentinels. He sensed the approach of the pirates. Knowing that confrontation was inevitable, he connected quickly again to that research ship and confirmed that the invaders were piercing the hull to dock by force. The graffiti on the side of the ship was proof that it really was them at that moment. The pirates invaded Samuel's ship, and the Shapeshifter noticed that the group was organized as you would expect from a group of specialists. However, he wondered if they were really smart or just stupid, since anyone would notice that something was very off about that ship. When the pirates advanced, they were startled by what they found. They reported to the boss that there was something very strange on the bridge, there was no one aboard, and plants were growing everywhere, taking up space in a weird way. The boss, irritated, couldn't understand how there could be plants in space and thought the men were mocking him. He called them idiots and decided to check it out personally, threatening to rip their heads off if necessary. When the boss entered the ship, the Shapeshifter analyzed him immediately and noticed that he had 2 reinforced hearts and machinery integrated into his body. It was evident that this mutant was the leader. Then he started to observe the other members of the group, identifying an insectoid, able to secrete pheromones, and a cyborg from the Stellar Union. The mechanical sounds replaced the beats of a heart. He realized that the gang was quite heterogeneous and worried about the variety of creatures that came consuming to evolve. He noticed a woman in the group and felt that there was something very suspicious about her. She seemed extremely normal to be there, as if she had a computer in her head, but she acted completely human. He realized that the poster was pretty heterogeneous and worried about the variety of creatures he was consuming to evolve. He noticed a woman in the group and felt there was something very suspicious about her. She seemed extremely normal to be there, as if she had a computer in her head but acted completely human. He considered her very suspicious and decided to keep a close watch on her. Meanwhile, the amorphous one was talking to number 26, asking where the baby would go. He himself answered that he had to leave, but that it would be dangerous, so he ordered number 26 to stay there. He also asked him to take care of his plasma weapon, emphasizing that the object was very important. Then he explained his plan to destroy the enemy ship's power generator, forcing the pirates to split their forces between protecting the research ship and the mothership. With that, they could form defense and attack groups, starting the hunt the moment they separated soon after. Love invaded the pirates' ship. He found it curious that there was no real security, something expected from pirates who never imagined being robbed. He moved through the halls until he found the nuclear reactor, noticing that everything seemed normal except for the security androids patrolling the area. He knew that if he attacked them directly, they would alert the artificial intelligence system, so he had to prepare first. For that, he looked for something to eat, walked around the ship until he found two pirates. He quickly killed the human, decapitating him, and when the insectoid tried to alert someone, he brutally tore off its hand. Then he violently killed the insectoid and devoured both bodies, only to find that those NPCs didn't contribute much to his evolution. Soon after, he heard the radio asking what happened to the patrol team. Love, imitating the voice of the dead human, replied that nothing had happened. He kept walking and opened a door, believing he wouldn't need to fight the androids upon entering. He used acid on the floor to clear a path and spotted the nuclear reactor. He commented to himself that a human would have noticed the trick, but the androids didn't perceive it. Then he attacked with poison, managing to deactivate the reactor. Meanwhile, the pirates were watching the security cameras, and the recordings were horrified to see that the ship had been taken over by a cruel monster that brutally killed everyone. The boss, extremely scared, didn't understand what was happening, observed the strange plants growing everywhere, noted the absence of life signs, and saw the ship transforming into a ghost ship. He knew he needed to find out more about that aggressor, and so he ordered them to play all the recordings as he watched. He began to perceive that the crew of the research ship had been massacred and that the administration of the place was completely destabilized. In one of the recordings, he saw a strange creature attacking from above, and concluded that it was not only strong but also extremely intelligent and dangerous. He was worried about the Yuyin family, but understood that before thinking about them, he had to ensure the recovery of the body safely. Then he called the woman the group nicknamed Garlic by her real name, Manhwa, asking if she had lost contact with them the day before. She confirmed, explaining that the initial plan was to meet the day before, but the ship didn't show up, so they spent the whole day looking for them. The boss realized he practically knew all the details about the research ship, but he still had no idea what exactly that creature was. Even so, he trusted that they had managed to infiltrate silently, believing the monster didn't know they were there. Finally, he ordered his men to locate and kill that creature before searching for the body they had gone to recover while everything was happening. One of the pirates warned the boss that there was a problem. The ship's engine was broken. The boss, irritated, couldn't understand how that could have happened if the engine was working perfectly. The pirate explained that the engine had been completely melted, which further enraged the boss. Out of anger at someone for tampering with his ship, he turned to Manuel and asked if he could pilot the ship. Although he got scolded for doubting, he finally confirmed that he could. The boss ordered 3 men to help him with the piloting task and sent the rest of the group to follow because he planned to hunt and kill that damn creature that was ruining his plans. The hidden love watched everything closely, finding it amusing to see the boss so irritated, and he felt confident because he knew the pirates had no idea there were still survivors hiding on the research ship, about 20 people, including the captain and the senior manager. He himself hadn't spared those men out of mercy, but because he intended to use the rivalry between the Megacorp and the pirates to his advantage. He was sure that as long as they fought, he could take advantage of it. He noticed that in the control room there were only 3 pirates and Manuel, the woman, pretending to be normal. He saw that as a perfect opportunity to attack, but still felt a bad premonition. His shapeshifter instinct warned him that she was very dangerous. He began to wonder if she could be Arnold's master and what she had done for Arnold to say such strange things about her. She seemed to be just a genetically modified human, but considering she was a noble from the capital of the Megacorp, it was very likely she had been altered beyond the conventional limits of Kizaragi. Yuyin thought that if she had been modified into something like a hacked player, it could be really hard to defeat her in her current youthful form. Still, he admitted to himself that seeing a strong opponent made him feel both fear and excitement at the same time. However, he decided that for now, he would deal with the pirates first. The scene then focused on the pirates. One of them reported that the biological detector had identified signs of humans in the captain's cabin, but the way was blocked. He suggested they might use a drill to make a hole nearby. The boss, very irritated, responded rudely, asking if that guy also needed permission to pee. Without further discussions, he ordered them to open the hole immediately. As soon as they managed to pierce the ship, they were surprised by a shot that hit one of the pirates directly in the face. The people hiding on the ship, they started attacking the invaders desperately. The boss, consumed by rage, reacted with violence. He killed everyone super quickly, but decided to leave one man alive to interrogate him. The survivor, trembling in fear, begged for his life and explained he was the leader of the medical team on that ship. He said he could be useful to them. The boss then asked him where the ship's captain was. The doctor replied that the captain had escaped in an emergency capsule. The boss was incredulous to hear that he had abandoned his own crew, but the doctor insisted that was all he knew, and he wasn't even sure if the captain had managed to escape. The boss analyzed the situation, realizing that the ship was completely destroyed because of the monster, and the only human who knew where the sought-after body was fleeing. He then had an idea and asked the doctor if he at least knew where the body they were looking for was. The doctor explained that the body, Kisaragi, had been taken by the monster. The furious boss wanted to know why the monster would want that body, and the doctor replied directly that it was because the monster ate humans. Upon hearing this, the boss understood there was no time to lose. He ordered all the pirates to move in groups of 6 and to notify immediately if they managed to find the monster, as it had become the top priority. Looking at the doctor, the boss told him he claimed he wanted to become a pirate, and that, coincidentally, they needed a doctor at that moment. He asked if he had knowledge of genetic remodeling. The doctor, sensing he could survive, confirmed that he did. Meanwhile, Love continued to watch silently, reflecting that everything had ended much faster than he expected. He recognized that he should have seen it coming. After all, his boss was a huge mutant, almost like Hulk. He also noticed that the pirates were moving in groups of 6 people, except for the boss, who stayed with just one of his men. He knew he also needed to start moving at that moment. Number 26 approached, saying he wanted to go with the baby because he wanted to help with the mission. Love thought that was kind of funny, like a kid who didn't want to separate from his dad. At the same time, he thought number 26 needed to gain combat experience even if he wasn't much help right now. He couldn't allow him to be a burden either, so Love picked up number 26 and placed him on his shoulder, telling him to pay close attention to the enemies. With a plan in mind, he decided to start by attacking the arsenal. Meanwhile, the pirates kept advancing through the ship, and one of the insectoids wondered aloud if that ship had turned into a jungle and what kind of creature could have the abilities to create plants bigger than the doors themselves. When the pirates began to cut those thick plants blocking the way, a green liquid ended up splattering them. They looked at each other, confused and disgusted. Trying to understand what that disgusting substance was, they suddenly noticed that the blade that had cut the vines started to melt, just like the face of one of the pirates hit by the liquid. At that moment, the amorphous creature appeared out of nowhere and killed one of the men before they could react. The pirates were terrified to see that monster. It was so different from anything they had faced before. Even trying to shoot at it, they achieved nothing, as the amorphous creature moved too fast and killed everyone in the blink of an eye. Number 26, taking advantage of the chaos, ended up possessing the head of the insect pirate that was left behind. However, one of the soldiers still alive managed to grab the radio and tried to warn the others that the monster was there before the amorphous creature killed him too. Then, it imitated the dead man's voice to respond over the radio, saying that nothing was happening, just to throw them off. It thought it would be better to stay with the radio since it could use it to create distractions in the future while analyzing the half-destroyed body of the man it had just killed, noticing that he was still breathing. It suspected it was because he was a cyborg and from the Stellar Union. It reflected on the contrast between the Megacorp, which preferred to modify human genes, and the Stellar Union, which believed the path to evolution was replacing the weak human body with mechanical parts. It thought the problem with the Stellar Union it was imposing those ideals on other species, transforming any hostage into a machine regardless of their will. It concluded that both the Megacorp and the Stellar Union were equally insane in their methods. After devouring that cyborg, it commented mentally that it had a very interesting taste, although metallic and oily from the mechanical parts. At that moment, the system appeared before it again to show the evolution requirements, warning that a part of the condition to evolve from the young puppy had a complete intelligence of 10 out of 10, but the second intelligence was barely at 1 out of 10. The amorphous one was surprised by that and remembered there were 12 pirate cyborgs on that ship. He concluded that if he managed to devour them all, he could advance to the next level of evolution, number 26. How curious. He asked why he was so excited. The amorphous replied vaguely that it was something he didn't need to know. In his thoughts, he compared the pirate cyborgs to space dogs, which some called space disasters. But to him, they were like Santa Claus bringing Christmas gifts. Meanwhile, the amorphous continued killing and devouring enemies throughout the ship, advancing with brutality and speed. He noticed he had completely eliminated 2 teams already, but he regretted losing 3 cyborgs in the process since their bodies had been corroded by the acid he had used. Only parts like legs were left, and he wondered whether to devour them or not while trying to eat one remaining leg. He ended up spitting it out, realizing he wasn't getting the predatory effect. He thought there was a small chance that could happen when he wasn't the one killing the target, so he decided to kill the pirate directly. The one number 26 was devouring. Even though he felt bad for doing it, recognizing he had no choice if he wanted to evolve. At that moment, the radio in one of the body's arms started emitting static. Demanding immediate answers, voices appeared, warning that there was a lot of chaos in the cargo compartment, while others complained that the restaurant was a mess. The Amorphous then used the radio to respond, saying the lab was clean. However, the man on the other side noticed something strange and said he wasn't in charge of the radio. The Amorphous quickly made up an excuse, saying he was preparing to loot everything, which is why he didn't have the radio before. He thought to himself that even though they were pirates, they were pretty paranoid. He also reflected that, despite the pirate chief being a very powerful mutant, he needed to keep an eye on him. He found it funny to be walking around with a slime on his back, thinking that the gaming community would go crazy if they knew that, since he was known for acting alone. He recognized he didn't have many friends and admitted that things in that game were becoming more and more different. That made him nervous but also excited. Meanwhile, the pirate chief was also suspicious. As a former military man, he was very strict and knew how to recognize signs of trouble. He felt that something was very wrong with the communications coming from the lab. His animal instinct warned him that everything could be a trap, so he ordered his men to go immediately to the lab to check what was happening. Then he turned to the doctor and asked where the escape ship was. The doctor asked him to follow him as they walked. The boss thought no one could ever touch his warship without paying dearly for it. He was already planning to find an escape route and set bombs in the engine room, making sure nothing would go unpunished. The pirate chief analyzed his plan coldly, knowing there was a nuclear fusion engine on the ship, which meant a small bomb would be enough to destroy everything. He thought that after fleeing and detonating the place, that monster wouldn't have a way to survive. He acknowledged that his own men left behind would also die, but he didn't care much about that. Since there were always creatures willing to join the pirates, the only people he planned to take with him were the doctor and Manuel. So he asked the doctor if there was any known weakness of that monster, but the doctor admitted there wasn't any. The boss concluded that he was a coward and scared, but that was all he had to say. He realized the doctor seemed more afraid of the monster than of him, determined to extract more information. The boss asked what the characteristics of that creature were. The doctor explained that it moved like a ghost. It devoured humans in the blink of an eye, leaving no trace, and they only noticed its presence long after. The boss mocked his incompetence, saying that only happened because they were idiots. Still, the doctor insisted the ship had many security systems, but the monster had avoided them all and killed all the targets. The boss thought that was ridiculous, but deep down, he understood he was telling the truth. He decided he needed to gather all his men to have a better chance of success. He took the radio and announced that the plans had changed, ordering everyone to regroup. Before moving toward the lab, while listening to that, the love thought that this boss was really cunning. Since he hadn't fallen for his imitation, something that even trained humans could be deceived by, maybe it was pure wild instinct. But he recognized it was now too late, as even while protesting, the pirates obeyed the orders and headed to the indicated location. The love then decided he needed a new attack plan. He used his tentacles to connect to the nest he had created on the ship, activating his nest manipulation ability. This transformed the entire structure into a living organ of his, basically trapping the pirates inside his stomach. He released parasitic spores into the environment, causing the pirates to start suffocating. Some tried to escape, but fell before they could get away. The love finalized the outcome and thought that when he evolved to juvenile state, he could use that ability much more efficiently. He admitted he had only used it out of curiosity this time, to understand how it worked, but he realized that left him extremely exhausted. He turned to number 26 and told him he was hungry, saying he needed to eat a bit, and then he began to devour the bodies of the pirates. He thought to himself that it was normal for pirates to abandon their comrades and noticed that 5 out of the 7 he killed were cyborgs. He checked the system to see how many more he needed to complete his evolution and saw that he only needed 2 cyborgs. To reach the next level, he also realized that 5 pirates had fled to the training room. He thought about why they would choose that place and concluded they probably thought they'd have a better view from there. Since it was a more open space, he remembered that the previous crew thought the same thing. Turning that place into a real slaughterhouse in the past, as he approached, he could feel through the doors the pheromones and the breathing of the people hiding, sensing the absolute terror they felt towards him. He warned number 26 that it would be very dangerous. He told him to hide behind him, then opened the door, thinking that more than 20 people had already died there and that killing 5 more wouldn't be a problem. The terrified pirates still tried to shoot at him, but nothing worked. One of them pulled out a saber and declared himself the second in command of the Drava cartel. He recognized the weapon as a sonic blade capable of damaging his armor, but considered that it was useless if the man didn't know how to use it properly, which he thought was typical of pirates. Acting recklessly, he attacked the man and managed to open a hole in the middle of his chest. He was surprised to notice that it was the first prey to show any persistence since he killed Arnold, so he decided to finish him off quickly to spare him more pain and agony. After dealing with him, he thought to himself that there were 4 enemies left. Imagining they were hiding in the locker room, at that moment, the system notified him that he had gained a skill called human nature, which he found intriguing. The name seemed very vague to him. He reflected on the genetic traits of that universe, knowing that there were hundreds of survival traits in space, not all were advantageous. For example, the Hulk's Berserker mode gave double physical strength but made the user lose complete self-control. He understood that some skills had downsides greater than their benefits. Characteristics with ambiguous names were generally the most dangerous. He thought of the Star Union that kidnapped people to turn them into robots, and of the CAD, Megacorp, that created monsters by remodeling human genes. He knew that civilizations, like those, dominated humanity in that universe and concluded that it was unlikely there would be a trait that granted human qualities without some terrible cost. Finally, he wondered if that skill would be something that gave him human emotions, considering that could be a disadvantage. It would be like a shapeshifter for him since he fed on people and assessed that the risk was very high, and decided to reject that ability at that moment. The instinct of love warned him to reconsider the ability. He wondered if it was really that important. His instinct indicated a very dangerous choice, but he thought for a bit and decided to trust it, accepting the risk by confirming the choice. His system shone, but nothing happened immediately. Then he realized that the human trait was classified as a mental trait. He still needed 3 more to achieve the enhancement of superconsciousness, and that human trait would help him in decision-making to choose the right path, which could be worth a lot in the future. While he was thinking about that, number 26 remarked that he had been still for too long, which was strange. Love replied that he shouldn't worry and explained that he could smell different pirates in the training room. He had no intention of letting any escape. The atmosphere in the room became tense when one of the pirates hidden watched his companions being killed. He wondered if he would be next. Unlike the others, he was just an ordinary man, desperately mentally pleading with the Chief Chewbacca to protect him. But Amorph used his tail to pierce him and devoured him immediately, then commented to himself that it was already 11 cyborgs eliminated, leaving only 1. The problem was that the last one was in the control room along with the person he was trying to avoid, a human with modified genes who he suspected belonged to the Eugen family. He concluded that before reaching her, he needed to resolve the issue with the ship's leader. At that moment, Amorfo was attacked, but managed to dodge quickly. It was the chief accusing him of having killed all his men, including the second in command. Number 26 jumped to the wall and camouflaged while Amor sensed how intimidating the chief was. The man was over 3 meters tall, and for many, Amorfo wouldn't stand a chance against him being just an enhanced mutant. Still, he wanted to see if he was really that powerful. Meanwhile, the pirates watched the fight on TV, debating whether they should intervene, but they remembered that the chief had ordered them to help Manuel, so they stayed put. One of them asked Manuel how much longer it would take, and she replied that she was almost done, explaining that the system was outdated. But it was still the artificial intelligence of a Megacorp battleship, an advanced core of engineering, space, and computer science, which made the job complicated. The pirates, not understanding anything she said, just asked her to hurry up so they could help the chief. But Manuel reflected that Arnold had done well to warn them. He knew that the monster had hidden among the smoke, but it couldn't fool her or escape her remote vision. He also remembered that he had emptied the lab and stolen genetic samples, which showed intelligence. He concluded that he knew how to use the abilities he acquired, and she wondered if she could evolve or absorb genes, becoming someone like her if it was true. Chen couldn't defeat him because he was just a monster, strengthened by the will of others. She didn't even know why she was created. She was tired of him, but considered that good news. She thought the pirates were useless now and needed to reduce the number of genes available for the monster to absorb. She had many names. The enemies of the Megacorp called her Witch, her family called her Shadow and treated her with admiration. The leader of the Akira family, Eugen, called her Code White, who was once her father called her Sijin. She was the pinnacle of the Eugen family's genetic engineering and the sole heir of a forgotten line. The scene then returned to the fight between the boss and Amorph. The battle was evenly matched. The boss managed to strike Amorph's tail, electrocuting him. Amorph felt intense pain in all his organs, and he wondered if the boss thought he was a combat android, even though it wasn't true. It wasn't a bad weapon choice. The boss said Amorph wasn't a weapon created by the Star Union, and he suspected that he understood his words. Then he revealed he had a button on his neck. Amorph wondered if it was a button to activate Berserk mode, but the boss explained that he had installed a bomb in the ship's nuclear reactor and that the detonator was synchronized with his own heart. If Amorph killed him, the whole ship would explode. Amorph then sensed from the doctor's reaction he was telling the truth, but concluded that in the end it didn't matter that much because the boss wouldn't easily detonate the bomb. He valued his own life too much. He was smart. He had an extraordinary body and huge arrogance. There was nothing in him that diminished his will to live. However, at that moment, the boss pressed the button on his neck, and that caused every cell in his body to change. He grotesquely transformed, revealing that he possessed something more than just simple genetic transplants. By the new form, Amorph recognized genes of mountain wanderers, also known as stone dragons because of the hardness of their shells. The boss tried to attack him, but Amorph quickly dodged and tried to pierce him with his tail. However, before completing the attack, he remembered the bomb and hesitated. It was at that moment that the boss delivered a violent blow to his head. The attack didn't kill him thanks to his stone head, but he thought he could have died if it weren't for that. He wondered if the boss's plan was precisely to provoke that confrontation to activate the bomb from the start. The boss claimed that Amorph's attacks were useless. Amorph reflected that unless he aimed for his heart, there would be no vulnerable points. The shells on his arms and legs were so tough that only a plasma weapon could penetrate them. He concluded that he would only win if he found a weak point, but it seemed like the boss already knew. Still, Amorph thought his tail wasn't his only dangerous weapon. While the boss attacked relentlessly, Amorph assessed his options, knowing he could release poison from his teeth and claws, and that he would only win if he managed to break the enemy's shell, wondering how he could shatter that reliable protection. And then he thought about the sonic blade as an alternative. Plus, he knew those mutants had an inevitable weakness. He just had to wait for the right moment for it to reveal itself, remembering that the warehouse they were in was where he had awakened. For the first time in that world, a perfect place to buy time, the boss continued attacking with monstrous strength. Amorph knew that Hulk-type mutants were incredibly strong and fast, but they consumed energy quickly. That's why, between hits, they needed a break to catch their breath. If the boss got tired, he would be forced to stop. He decided to wait for that moment, but remembered the boss had two hearts. The problem was figuring out which one was connected to the detonator. He knew that the main heart of Hulk-type mutants was usually on the left side, so it was likely the detonator was linked to that one. However, the boss was too smart to make that obvious, and Amorph couldn't detect the mechanism. While he was planning, the boss located him and launched a violent punch in his direction. Amorph managed to escape once more, but noticed the boss was starting to get irritated with his attempts to flee. He deduced that with the modifications, the enemy had reduced his weak point since normally by now, he would be tired and would have stopped. Nevertheless, he noticed that his speed was already slower. Amorph decided it was time to act. He jumped in front of the boss, and at the moment he tried to hit his head. He took advantage of the opening to react. He drew the saber and plunged it into the boss's arm, creating a crack in the armor, then bit down hard, causing the boss to scream in pain. Furious, the boss threw him away, screaming in rage. However, at that instant, the boss's body began to paralyze and fell to the ground. Amorph realized the poison wasn't as effective on normal humans, but now it must be spreading through the enemy's body. Then he began to tear apart the boss's body. Discovering that the detonator was on the right side, he perceived that the counter activated upon receiving a very strong hit, and that the second heart limited the side effects of genetic manipulation. The boss's plan was to die taking Amorph with him. After dismantling the detonator, Amorph thought about taking advantage of the genetic samples from the Hulk mutant. At that moment, number 26 appeared. Amorphous ordered him to hide, but 26 said there were problems. Amorphous then had a sudden vision of the future, seeing 26 die and himself being killed, too gripped by panic. He grabbed 26 and ran away. It was then that Se-Yoon attacked them. She was impressed that he had managed to escape, and showed curiosity about where he had gotten that thing he was carrying. Amor understood that he had planned to deal with her in the end, but he didn't expect her to chase him there. He noticed a bright spear forming in her hand, a sign that her genes were mixed with those of high-level organisms. He saw dozens of visible genetic traits in her, and understood he could never defeat her in that state. His whole body warned him not to face that creature. He knew he needed to retreat and reorganize quickly. But at that moment, Se-Yoon pierced the boss's heart with his weapon, which probably activated the bomb's timer. Amor panicked, thinking about what he could do now. Since he wouldn't be able to attack her without dying, he also concluded that he needed to observe the enemy for more information. He focused on her eyes, which looked like those of an observer from outside space or perhaps a wrecking ball. He continued. Then he made her a proposal. Noticing that she was similar to him, he promised to spare her life in exchange. He wanted him to serve her, as if he were her pet. After all, they were both creatures that depended on genes, and she said she could be a perfect master for him. Se-Yoon then invited Amorphous to join her. He was surprised to realize that the powerful Se-Yoon was demanding he become her slave. Using his hypersense, he perceived that she wasn't lying. He observed the claw-shaped blade in her fist, recognizing it as a Galaron claw, something capable of piercing even his protective shell, plus she had many other lethal weapons. He understood that rationally submitting to her would be the sensible choice. Amorphous then knelt at her feet, and Se-Yoon smiled, saying he had made the right decision. But number 26 tried to encourage him, telling him not to be afraid, that he was there with him at that moment. Amor. He remembered why he always liked playing with his character. He didn't understand why he was so obsessed with a character considered useless, or why the online communities called him more Pop Park. The answer was simple. He loved the freedom to choose, to grow with every decision, getting stronger without limits. That's why he loved being amorphous, and that's why there was a real choice for him when Se-Yoon tried to pet his head like he was a good boy. He reacted by throwing acid at her face and taking advantage of the surprise. He escaped to hide while Se-yoon, furious, yelled that if he wanted to play that way, then she would accept the game. And she started launching flames in his direction. Amorph thought she was much stronger than him, maybe the most powerful enemy he had faced. Since he became amorphous, however, he had already defeated extraordinary enemies before, and he had always come out victorious. He promised himself he would teach her a lesson, remembering that a fight wasn't just about brute strength. Meanwhile, the ship's captain managed to get up, furious with Si-hun for bringing him to that state. He vowed to make her beg for her life, but soon noticed that his device was destroyed. He realized everything would be lost if he didn't reach the engine room in 10 minutes. Still, he told himself he wouldn't die there, because he was different from the others. He was Elendrava. Meanwhile, Amorph ran alongside number 26, who asked him if his legs hurt. Amorph replied that no, not just his legs. His whole body hurt. He noticed that Se-yoon's eyes had X-ray vision, which made any surprise attack useless. If he tried to hide, she would find him quickly. Besides, she had other sensory abilities, which made the situation even more complicated. He thought he was running out of time and that Se-yoon probably already knew he was looking for the bomb. He imagined she expected him to try to escape using an emergency capsule, and that's why she would block the entrances to corner him. He recognized it was the same strategy he himself had used against the pirates before. It was like fighting another skilled player. For now, he decided he needed to focus on eliminating the enemy before worrying about the bomb. He knew that facing her would also give him more information. The problem was that his abilities were inferior to hers. Thinking quickly, he remembered something special in the lab, something that could turn the tables in his favor. That item was called John, a resource capable of allowing him to use the abilities of a youthful body for a limited time. He knew the technique Se-yoon used was called a sword dance, a Galeron ability that combined brutal physical strength. At that moment, he had zero tolerance for physical attacks, but if he evolved, he could withstand it. He also wanted to launch ranged attacks, but that consumed a lot of energy. Still, he knew he was out of time. To worry about his reservations, he asked number 26 to wait a bit, explaining that he needed to pick up something urgent. So he started searching desperately until he finally found the object in the game that only appeared as a notification. But now he needed to figure out how it worked in real life at that moment. Number 26 tried to stop him, telling him not to do it. Love got confused, wondering why 26 was acting this way, but he didn't have time to think any further. He ignored the warning and took the plane without waiting. Soon, his body began to transform, causing him intense pain. After enduring that terrible pain, he realized that his appearance had changed drastically. Now he had an absurdly imposing design. He noticed some differences. His skeleton reinforced had turned into a monstrous skeleton. His head now sported magnificent horns that he could use to pierce enemies. In his left hand, a new organ had emerged that shot bone spines. His strength was comparable to plasma guns, and he could apply those features in his attacks. His shell was protected by a shield resilient to physical attacks, which would allow him to withstand the claws of a Galeron. However, he knew he had to check the time limit in the game, which only lasted 5 minutes, and he assumed it would be the same in reality. He located Xion with his sensors, realizing that she was even more dangerous than he imagined. He knew he had to wear her down as much as possible before starting the decisive fight. He quickly connected to the ship, telling himself that 5 minutes wasn't much time. He needed to sort everything out as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Si-jun was walking through the ship, getting hit by spores that released an acidic liquid. Still, she smiled and protected herself using her amorphous fire, noticing that it was getting closer and warned number 26 to hold on tight. She planned to lure it to the place where the nuclear reactor was, knowing that in that spot, she wouldn't be able to fight with all her strength because even the lightest hit could cause a devastating explosion impossible to survive, even for someone with many special genes. When Amorphous was almost at the reactor, Si-yoon was already waiting to protect it. Amorphous threw number 26 away. It was immediately caught by flames once again. However, this time, it managed to see its movements clearly, something it usually couldn't do, and it launched an attack. Despite that, Si-jun used her claw to strike its face, recognizing that it was faster than before, but saying that it still wasn't enough to defeat her. Amor managed to grab her with its tail and launch some spines in her direction, but Se-yoon successfully blocked the attack. She admitted that the hit wasn't bad, as it forced her to worry a bit at that moment. However, her hair changed to a bright red. This scared Amor, who didn't expect that transformation in an extremely quick move. Si-jun cut off its tail before it could react, commenting that he really knew about the red mist, considering it a very interesting opponent. It explained that the red mist was a predator from forest planets that exhaled a threatening pheromone, causing hallucinations in its prey. Amor realized that if she really had that ability, she'd have to defeat her quickly before the effect of lion wore off. She struggled to stay calm and waited for an opportunity. When she lunged to attack her, She managed to bite her arm just as she tried to defend herself, irritated. Sejun responded, saying that she was boring him. Amor launched spines again, which were blocked once more. However, at that moment, her hair returned to its normal color. Amor realized that she had discovered something important. Although Sejun had abilities powerful enough to face advanced players, she had a critical weakness. She couldn't use two abilities at the same time. Amor understood that she needed to figure out how long it took to change powers, and that no matter how fast she was, there would always be an opening to attack. Determined to change her strategy, Amor lunged once more with the goal of cornering her. The narrative then shifted to number 26. He remembered the world where he opened his eyes for the first time. It was a cold, dense environment called by intelligent beings. The bottom of the sea was his home, a place of low temperatures and high pressure. Still, number 26 didn't consider that place bad, since there were others of her kind living together who protected her, even though they were weak and always lived in fear. When she discovered her special powers, she started using them to protect her kind from predators. Over time, she became the leader of that group, but her life didn't change much. They shared food and slept together in tight groups, and for her, that was the greatest happiness that could exist. However, that happiness didn't last long. One day she heard the desperate screams of the others and wished with all her might to save them. She thought she had succeeded, but unfortunately, miracles don't happen so easily. After years, the leader who had failed in her duty woke up in a liquid, foul prison. There she was forced to witness the miserable death of all those she had tried to protect. When someone with a furry animal in their arms called her number 26, there was no one of her kind left alive in that prison. Deep in that hell, she prayed to whoever could hear her, begging to be saved. Willing to sacrifice her own life to protect others, back to the battle, Sejun showed fatigue from the attack she considered useless. Amorph was trying to take advantage of an opening. She almost managed to pierce her with her stinger, but Sejun cut it at the last moment. When the stinger was cut, an acidic slime spread, reaching Sejun and completely melting her clothes. Amorph was very surprised to notice that the acid hadn't harmed Sejun as she expected. She didn't know that Sejun had skin made of super alloy, the same material used in Goblin Wolf Fran's suit. That super alloy acted as a super reinforced armor, extremely resistant but also made her body much heavier, and Hyun responded to Amorph's astonishment coldly, showing that she wouldn't tolerate betrayal. For her, a pet that bites the owner needs to learn a lesson, so she delivered a very strong blow to the abdomen. Still injured, Amorph didn't waste time and grabbed her from behind. Noticing how heavy she actually was, taking advantage of her strength, she lifted her and threw her away. But before she could regain her balance, Sejun launched powerful flames in her direction. Amorph saw an opening in that action. She immediately advanced to attack her, but Sejun quickly dodged, avoiding her bite. Even so, Amorph didn't seem frustrated. She had planned that with her bite, she opened a hole in the ship's hull, allowing the vacuum of space to start sucking everything out, while the artificial wind became deadly. Hyun tried to hold onto some structure, but Amorph was already close to her. Taking advantage of the chaos she had caused, he noticed that she struggled to activate two abilities at the same time, and he knew he had to kill her before she succeeded. He began urgently launching spines in her direction, trying to finish her off, but the attacks couldn't penetrate his reinforced skin at that critical moment. Number 26 shouted for Amor to leave his baby alone, immediately launched a shock attack. So powerful it shook the entire ship and hit Sejun hard. One of Amor's spikes ended up piercing Sehun's eye in the process. However, the void also dragged number 26 outside. Desperately, she called for help from Amor, who quickly managed to grab her to prevent her from being absorbed by space. He also grabbed Sehun's body, saving her temporarily. After seeing number 26's electric attack, Amor started to think about what she could really be, but decided to save those reflections for later. At that moment, she needed to get out of there as fast as possible. She started dragging Sejun's body away from the hole, trying to keep everyone safe. While doing so, she noticed that the environmental maintenance system wasn't working properly, since the open hole in the ship hadn't been automatically sealed. If everything was normal, he would have already fixed that himself, but there was no one there to help him. Aside from some pirates who were definitely too busy hiding from him to care about what was happening, he concluded that the ship was already lost. Number 26, noticing the situation, asked what had happened to her arm. Amor looked at her own body and realized she was starting to disintegrate. She replied that the ion effect was wearing off. Still, she felt relieved, since it didn't hurt to return to her original form. For her, losing that transformation wasn't a reason for sadness, since she had gained something even more important in those games where Megacorp tested their soldiers. Players obtained more than 100 different genes collected from incredibly rare and dangerous creatures. Even if Hyun, being a high-level NPC, had a respectable amount of genes, although it didn't reach that much by devouring her. Amorfo imagined she would get at most 3 new genes, but she didn't care about that. What she really wanted was Galaron's claw. However, at the moment she was going to devour his head, she had a new premonition. She clearly saw that if she ate him, his body would explode immediately. Then she remembered the bomb She sensed that there were only 5 minutes left until detonation and knew she wouldn't have enough time to deactivate it. She needed to flee the ship immediately. But just crossing the hall to the escape pod would take at least 5 minutes, and that was too long. The only alternative was to use the plasma weapon without hesitation. Amor grabbed it and charged it to maximum power, fired a shot so powerful it pierced the entire ship, creating a direct shortcut without wasting time. She launched herself outside, calculating they weren't far from the escape point. As she approached, she noticed that one of the escape pods was already open. She wondered if someone had tried to get in before, but he felt relieved since it saved him the trouble of forcing his way in. The scene then shifted to the boss, who was reflecting on how he had almost died an hour earlier. His senses had slowly returned, but his body was a mess since one of his hearts had been ripped out. He remembered how he had almost detonated the bomb while trying to disable it and decided to reprogram the device to explode in 10 minutes. That way, he would have enough time to escape from there and make sure that those monsters were destroyed in the process. The boss walked through the ship in silence and noticed how strangely calm everything was. He wondered if any of the other crew members had already died but decided it didn't matter, since he considered both of them a risk to his life. At that moment, he ran into Captain Samuel, who seemed to be hiding because he hadn't managed to leave the ship in time. Samuel, trembling, took a plasma weapon and aimed it at the boss, telling him not to come closer. But the boss, unfazed, asked him why he didn't take the safety off first before threatening someone. Taking advantage of the captain's hesitation, the boss struck him hard. He thought to himself that he would kill Samuel if he had the time, but he couldn't afford that luxury right now. When the boss tried to shoot Samuel, the plasma weapon, which had been carelessly charged, exploded. The blast was so violent that it completely destroyed Samuel's body. Amor, elsewhere on the ship, heard the crash caused by the explosion. Meanwhile, number 26 ended up passing out, even though she wasn't seriously injured. Amor knew she would wake up soon. She surveyed the damage and reflected that the first place she stepped foot in that world was now completely destroyed. It was time to say goodbye to that research ship. While exploring the wreckage, Amor found a bottle of liquor and wondered who would have drunk there. She then decided to check the security camera footage and discovered that Captain Samuel had stayed behind drinking while waiting for things to calm down. He seemed to trust that some of his soldiers would deal with more for him. Seeing that, Amor thought it wasn't her problem and simply deleted the internal video and switched the ship's navigation system to standby mode. Then, she explained that the TC's Special Exchange Center was a massive space colony wandering through space, serving as a major meeting point for players from all around the world who wanted to trade. Amor had hunted players there before to collect their genetic essences. It was explained that the Special Exchange Center of TC was a huge space colony wandering through space, serving as a great meeting point for players from all over the world who wanted to make amorphous exchanges. He had already hunted players there before to collect their genetic essences. That's why he was known by many unflattering names, including the Cowardly Nerd. Still, he redirected the ship's course towards the Special Exchange Center of TC, programming the autopilot to get there. The system estimated 3 hours of travel. Amorphous thought that a colony with various different species would be the perfect place to feed. He reflected also on how no one would imagine that number 26 was actually a sea demon. These creatures looked a lot alike in appearance and habitat, but they had important differences, like size. Although they weren't hostile by nature, they possessed an extremely powerful ability called ***, Fear of the Depths ***. It made anyone within its reach go insane with terror. This ability was similar to the hallucinations caused by the red mist, but it could be activated constantly, had a greater range, and was as rare as the ***, Galleon Claw ***. Amorphous then approached number 26, thinking she might be his best chance to get that rare trait. However, he hesitated at the thought of devouring her, knowing there was no guarantee the predator effect would work anyway. Besides, he had grown close to her and didn't want to betray her. He decided then to do everything he could to help her, even if it put his own life at risk. Next, he turned his attention to Seiyan's body. The woman who had given him so much trouble, now it was time to devour her. As he tore into her flesh, Amorphous noted the amazing taste. He remembered that Kisaragi's meat tasted like a luxurious meal, prepared with care. In contrast, the taste of Sejun was different, wilder, but even more delicious. The more he chewed, the more appetizing it became. It was better than any other being he had devoured. Upon finishing, Amorphous gained new skills. X-ray vision, camouflaging skin, and finally, the Galleon Claw, The scene then shifted to planet Jack 1, the capital of the Stellar Union. In one of its industrial zones, a robot cat walked calmly, observing several androids who greeted a large commander named Kubaka, considered the father of all cyborgs. Meanwhile, the little cat wandered through the hallways until it reached a room with a containment capsule. Inside it was the body of a woman. Suddenly, the capsule opened slowly, and the figure inside revealed to be Se-yoon. She looked at her own body, confused, wondering if she was really in her reserve body. She never imagined she would end up trapped in a cloned body. Se-yoon analyzed the clone's data and ordered the computer to show them the genetic modifications. The system informed her that some genes had not been updated yet. Furious, Se-yoon slammed the terminal, frustrated to realize that all the genes she had collected had been lost. She cursed the creature responsible for it and swore that one day she would tear its body to pieces. The scene shifted to the tech space mall located in the port district. There, a man held a headset and spoke to someone asking if the carpenter was busy. He replied brusquely, questioning why they asked that question. The person on the other side explained that a ship from the Megacorp had entered Area 7 without responding to the control tower's calls, and there was something strange about it since the ship was on autopilot. The man decided to check personally what was happening and wondered what capital that ship had come from. As he walked toward the escape module, he noticed the vehicle was expensive and high-end. When he opened the door, he saw several bottles of liquor scattered on the floor and picked up some strange viscous substance, wondering what that could be. But he didn't know that Amorfo was already waiting there in silence. Meanwhile, other workers were looking for the carpenter, who had left early and hadn't returned. When they finally found him, they were very surprised by his appearance. One of them commented that he thought the carpenter would stay late at work, but the carpenter explained that the boss had let him go because he was very busy. Still, there was something clearly strange about his face and posture. As he walked, the carpenter began to transform into Amor, reflecting on how he never imagined his new ability would be so effective. He had learned to fuse the skin camouflage he got from Si-hyun with the imitation feature. This fusion not only copied the shape of the victims, but also their internal organs, allowing for a detailed analysis of those he had devoured. It also emitted a special pheromone that confused the senses of those nearby, making them see him as if he were the victim itself. This ability seemed almost perfect, but Amor knew very well its limitations. The pheromones didn't work in mirrors or cameras, which could easily reveal his identity. Furthermore, there was the so-called mysterious valley, a strange effect that made others feel uncomfortable looking at him for too long. Although it was a skill full of advantages, it also presented risks. What he desired most, however, was the Claw of Galeron that he had finally obtained, even if it didn't have an immediate application. He considered it even more valuable to have assimilated Amor's supersense, giving him new X-ray vision, which would be extremely useful in the future by combining it with other abilities. He was still surprised by an unexpected mutation. Monstrous tentacles began to grow behind his head. Those tentacles resembled those that sprouted from the mouths of the Galargons known as space dragons. Amorph recognized he had to thank Se-hyun's body for that acquisition. Now he had 4 important super characteristics and knew that when he evolved into his juvenile form and developed super tolerance, he could achieve even more power. While reflecting on those changes, Number 26 woke up gasping, saying he felt like he was drowning. Amorph asked him for patience, explaining that he still needed to organize everything to keep them safe. Next, he arrived at the special tech mall and noticed how the place looked fancy from the outside, but empty and dead inside. That's exactly why he chose it as his destination. He knew the mall was divided into 4 districts and a central administrative district. There was the recreational district where the Megacorp citizens relaxed with their hired slaves. Combat androids were always ready to capture criminals. The residential district was near the slums where the poorest lived. It was such a neglected place that no one was surprised when someone simply disappeared. Love thought he could move around there without drawing attention as long as he was careful of the patrolling androids. His biggest challenge was deciding how to get there. The options were the sewers or the subway. Both had been built along with the city, but in space, there was no water, which meant the sewers were almost always under intensive maintenance. He thought if this were a game, he would choose the sewers to hide better, but that was reality. The subway was the safest option. He knew of a special passage he used to take and started looking for it. He entered a dark alley and after a thorough inspection, found the hidden entrance. He thought to himself that only he knew this place. When he touched the panel, the door opened, revealing the secret passage to the subway. Located on the edge of the port district, that was his exclusive route. The narrative then shifted to the wildlife smuggling monitoring office in the port district. There, some men were struggling to contain a gigantic creature. One of them looked at the clock and commented that his shift was over, notifying his coworkers he was going home and leaving them the rest of the heavy work. The woman was shouting in anger, asking if that bastard was blind since they were fighting a huge monster while he said he would leave as if nothing was happening. The impassive man simply wished her luck and said he wasn't doing overtime. The scene then shifted to the special exchange center of the tech and the entertainment district. There he was, sitting, choosing from several options of very beautiful women, wondering which one he should pick that day. His eyes ended up fixating on a woman who reminded him a lot of someone from work, which made him decide on her without thinking too much. Shortly after, his hand was completely covered in blood. He commented to himself that it had been even better than he expected, but for a moment he wondered if he had been too harsh with her. However, he calmed down, remembering that the shop would clean everything up as it always did. The woman's situation was unfortunate, and he recognized that was exactly why he frequented that place, feeling satisfaction. He decided it was time to drink and commented that he would have 2 drinks before heading home. As he left, he approached the subway entrance. Noticing everything was completely off, he muttered curses, wondering who the unfortunate soul was that broke the lights. He turned on his flashlight to move through the darkness, feeling increasingly uneasy as he walked, commenting to himself that he needed to hurry. It was then that someone appeared out of nowhere and asked where he was headed. He replied that he was just on his way home. The other man commented on the darkness and asked if it would bother him to accompany him. He felt somewhat suspicious, but with no options, he said it was fine to follow him. The man then asked if he was a cyborg, and he confirmed it. At that moment, he realized something was very wrong. He looked closer at the stranger and noticed a strange creature emerging from his arm. He immediately remembered a friend who had told him about a killer who ripped people's heads off. He knew that if he didn't do something, he would be the next victim. Without hesitation, he started running as fast as he could. Amor watched him flee and commented to himself that he understood. The reason number 26 was with him, he thought, was how his heart rate had accelerated upon seeing 26. He wondered why he was so scared. Then he remembered that man had said he was a cyborg. Amorfo needed to consume another cyborg to evolve into his juvenile form. He was exactly the target he needed. Meanwhile, he made it home, panting, saying to himself that he almost died, but he'd worry about that later. The next day, he flopped onto the couch, turned on the TV, and complained about how horrible that place was. He swore that as soon as he had enough money, he would leave that place for good. Outside in the alley, Amor watched him silently. The scene then moved to another day. After working overtime, he remembered that strange guy he almost encountered in front of his house and wondered if he would be waiting for him again. But he calmed himself, saying he would be safe if he kept to that specific path. However, when he looked up, he froze at the sight of a terrifying creature standing right in front of him in panic. He immediately called the police in the residential area, saying there was a monster in his house. Meanwhile, Amor entered his residence, noticing that the place was narrow and filled with trash, except for the bed, which was relatively clean. For him, hunting a cyborg as prey was essential for his research. During the day, he had researched who lived in that building and discovered several prey to feed on. For example, there lived a cold-blooded reptilian man, a wolf, therianthrope, and many other species. To reach the subadult state, he needed to consume much more complex prey, totaling 60 playable species. In addition to 4 specific additional types, many players dropped out at that stage because it was extremely difficult. He recognized it was a sensible decision since the difficulty increased dramatically after reaching the subadult form. Still, he knew there were many different alien races in the tech mall, which would make collecting the genes he needed easier. Plus, the Megacorp had diplomatic ties with a dangerous cult. This meant there would be no shortage of cultists in the administrative district to hunt and complete their list. Amor then thought to himself that he should check that building better. He noticed that the place didn't have good sound insulation since he could hear noises coming from the apartment above. Having confirmed that no one was living on the lower floor, he soon noticed footsteps approaching. There were 3 people in total, now identified as a cyborg and 2 police officers. At that, Amorfo took number 26 and quickly hid. He had no intention of fighting the authorities at that moment. Instead, he decided to just watch and wait to see what would happen next. Guys, for now, the alien chapters have come to an end. But if this video gets a lot of likes and comments asking for the next part, you can be sure that as soon as new chapters come out, I'll bring them to you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because almost half of those watching still aren't subscribed. Show that support. Until the next video, thanks.